guys, good morning. And I don't think we're missing anything yet. Watching the Law and Crime and Court TV to see when they put something up. And so far, this is all I've got. But that's okay. I thought we'd be starting a little early because I wanted to go over the stuff I was looking at earlier this morning, which prompted me to put the stream up. And that's kind of what the law is in Wisconsin, which may not be intuitive. It wasn't to me when I was looking it up. So I thought, well, I wonder how this is going to play out in these opening statements. So I could be wrong on some of this because I was doing it in a hurry. So correct me in the comments if you know something on the docket or whatever that I'm missing. At any rate, my understanding is that she has a not guilty plea and a not guilty by reason of insanity plea. And when you do that in Wisconsin, you have a bifurcated trial. And that means that they split it in two. So the first phase will be a guilt phase. And she's got 3 charges, in first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and then also assault. So that's what she's facing. The state in that guilt phase will bear the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt all the elements of a crime like they normally would. And if she's found not guilty there, well, that's the end of the thing, right? However, if she's found guilty, then they would go to phase 2, which is the insanity portion. And in Wisconsin, the insanity defense is an affirmative defense, and the state puts the burden on the defendant to prove that. Let me tell you what that is. Sorry, I'm a little behind. Like I said, I've got some work going on here, as some of you guys know, and we had an electrical thing. Don't want anybody to get hurt. Okay, so the issue to be determined in the insanity portion of the trial, which will not be this first portion of the trial, is a person is not responsible for criminal conduct if at the time of such conduct, as a result of mental disease or defect, he or she lacked substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of his or her conduct or conform his or her conduct to the requirements of the law. So that's the standard for the affirmative defense of insanity. Now, the burden of proof says the defendant must establish the presence of this mental disease or defect defense to a reasonable certainty by the greater weight of the credible evidence. Now, not every state has a bifurcated system. Sometimes you just plead not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity, and it goes to court and it's all done in one trial. But that's not how they do it in Wisconsin. So that's interesting to me. And I think that's self-explanatory. So the first jury should stay. And then if they find her guilty, they'll move to the next phase, whether they decide if she was insane or not under the legal definition, which is not any kind of medical definition. Also, an interesting thing in Wisconsin is the affirmative defense of insanity. The jury needs to return a decision only with what they call 5/6 of the vote. So 10 out of 12 jurors, assuming they keep the whole 12. So that's interesting. Now, people have asked me already in the comments a very good question, which is, how's this constitutional? You're putting the burden onto the defendant. And that's a good point. But it's a little bit of tricky thinking. So the state retains the burden beyond a reasonable doubt of every element of the crime. But it's the defendant who's deciding to bring up the affirmative defense. And when they do that, you could have proven every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt, but then the law will provide a way out for you. And that could be self-defense. It could be insanity. There are a few other things. And what the state does with that is kind of up to the state to some degree. And some states keep the burden on the prosecution, right? But some don't. And in this case, they didn't. They say, look, if you're going to say that you were insane, then you need to be the one showing that. Your team needs to be able to establish that. And that's constitutional to some degree. 4 states don't even have a normal, what you would think of as an insanity defense anyway. So they still do in Wisconsin, like most states, but it's a separate portion of the trial generally. Not always, but generally. And sometimes you could go ahead and plead guilty and then say, yeah, I did do it, but I wasn't insane. I was insane when it happened. So let's get on to phase 2. Then you would do that. But that hasn't happened here. And that's what makes it interesting to me is when we do see the opening arguments, what will the defense do to try and say she's not the person who did this, or that she didn't have the intent? Because you still have to prove intent because of the nature of the charge, or you could come down to some kind of lesser included offense or whatever. But for first degree, you're going to have an intent. Now, what's interesting there is there was the idea that, well, I'll get 2 bites at the apple, which the law generally doesn't like, which is I'll call in my experts and say I was bananas, and so I couldn't have had this intent or didn't have this intent. and see if I get off on that. And if that doesn't work, I'll go to phase 2 and just try it again on insanity. And the court system said, look, we don't want to be hearing the same people twice. And also, you can be insane and intend to do something, but you're crazy when you did it. So that's whether you intended it or not is not an element of the insanity defense. It's whether you were insane when you did it. So they don't let you do that in the first phase of the trial. They don't let you argue diminished capacity with an expert saying this person, this defendant didn't or couldn't form the intent. They hold that into the insanity phase. So you could have some testimony about the hard background and things like that that could show that she didn't form the intent, but that's more limited than you might expect because of the bifurcated nature of the trial. If you were doing it all at once, you'd have all the insanity experts in there arguing intent at the same time as they're arguing insanity, and that's not going to happen. Or it shouldn't happen, I guess I should say. Lots of things happen that you don't expect to have happen. So there is the intent argument that's going to be, I think, a portion of what the defense does here, because how can they possibly claim she's not the person who did it, right? So it's going to be interesting to me to hear these opening arguments from the defense side of what their slant is. So let me get some comments here, since I'm coming at this a little rough. Is my camera blurry? Everything's blurry to me right now because I just came inside with these glasses, so it might be. That's possible. And for all I know, I could lose signal at any minute because there's some serious construction going on out here. Anyway, all right, is the insanity portion presented to the same jury? And the answer is, generally speaking, yes, okay? They intend to have that. It's not by necessity, and as a matter of fact, you could, in theory, you could find the person guilty, and then something happens on the second phase, goes up on appeal on the insanity piece and gets reversed, and you retain the guilty verdict, but you just do the insanity part again. So, let's see what this is. All right. So the camera is okay, apparently. So everything's a little blurry to me at this point. So that was interesting to me that the diminished capacity piece is not really there in this first phase of the trial. It's not so much available to you as the defendant. You're going to need to keep your I was bonkers stuff to the second phase. Also, if you're voluntarily intoxicated, like, well, I took a lot of drugs and everything, they're not going to help you out with that either. It's not necessarily a defense. But it is interesting because sometimes when you get these what's called specific intent, which is you actually meant to kill this person, sometimes being drunk and stuff can help with that because then it can go down more to the reckless category. Like I was just being a complete idiot. I didn't mean to kill this person or whatever. So I'm kind of interested to see what happens here with this. And if I'm looking at this correctly, it's a little blurry here too, but maybe that'll change. And the internet went out a couple times last night, and there's some weather right now. Why that would affect my camera going up and coming back and not the stream that I'm looking at, I don't know. I have no IT support. I'm out in the woods. All right, so still nothing here. So Court TV has been changing their stream about 15 minutes, and so it is about 9:30 here, which makes it 8:30 in Wisconsin. That'd be very early to have a jury in the box. But sometimes they'll cover pretrial stuff before that. And so I thought maybe the stream would start before that. So I wanted to get on in it. So she'll have this first phase of the trial, which is based on her not guilty verdict. And they'll have to prove the elements of the crime. And that's what they're going to argue about. It won't be about whether she's insane or not. Then if she's found guilty, she'll go to the insane portion of the trial. If she's found not insane there, then she would have a sentencing phase. And given what she's facing, she faces, of course, potentially life imprisonment. Now, life is not necessarily life. The judge has some discretion in that. And they changed the word parole to extended supervision. So they can say, we don't do parole, but they do extended supervision, which is basically the same thing. So the judge would weigh the factors, same stuff we went over in the Brooks case in terms of what the judge needs to consider and put on the record for a sentence, and then do that. I did note that she was listed as a repeater, and there can be enhancements for that. If you're a persistent repeater, which is defined in their law as somebody who's committed 2 or more serious felonies, which has a specific definition, it's possible you can get life with no extended supervision, so you would just go away. but I didn't see persistent repeater, and I think it actually is different whether you're a repeater or persistent repeater. Every state uses different words and different laws. It's hard to know what they all are. So, yeah, repeater, what has she repeated? I can't say that because I don't know what her record is or whatever, or whether they're able to glom on to the other charges. I don't know the answer to that, but it didn't say persistent repeater, which was the words I was looking for to trigger a mandatory life sentence without extended supervision potentially. So I'll probably know more about that later, but I was more interested in learning about how they handle the insanity defense. Remember, Brooks had put a plea in of not guilty by reason of insanity, but withdrew it. So here's a comment. I think she will behave during the first phase of the trial and do weird things during the second. Potentially, but given that in theory, you're going to be facing the same jury, maybe not a good idea. I think if you're not actually crazy, but you want to act crazy, you need to be consistent with that because the same people are going to be looking at you. All right, I got a commercial coming up here. Yeah, who would think that she would have committed other crimes? Probably she has. I didn't look up her record, I admit. All right, I'm going to bring the volume up on this thing and make it big because this might be what we're here for. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Say I had to be outside, so.
7 essentially talks in great deal about the bifurcated process and the rights that a defendant is entitled to as it relates to that NGI presentation.
Okay, well, I received the report this morning, so I haven't even had a chance to review it. So at the risk of hearing all the same arguments again, which I don't want to do, Mr. Freilich, any response to any of that at this particular point?
Yes. I had been in contact with Dr. O'Donnell. He had to review information and he gave me an opinion for trial. That's what the court wanted me to do. I received that. I suppose we could take this up. I'd ask that we take it up at a later date. We're here to do phase 1. This would apply to phase 2 if it even gets to that point. But I haven't had much of an opportunity to review all of the documentation that was provided. But I know that Dr. O'Donnell apparently has testified in the state of Illinois with regards to the NGI plea and toxicity and opinions on the toxicology of methamphetamine. So all of that, I think we could take up at a later point. I know today we're here for the fact-finding part of this case. Thank you.
Okay, well, we will take it up at a
So they are talking bifurcation early, so I'm glad we had a discussion.
Okay, then as soon as the jury arrives, we'll get underway. I will instruct them with 601, as I had indicated to the parties I was going to do, and then we'll get underway with opening statements. As I indicated on Friday, opening statements will be limited to 30 minutes each. You'll get a warning at about when you have about 5 minutes left. And anything else from the state? From the defense, Mr. Freilich?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, then we are in recess until the jury is assembled.
All right, I'm going to cut the volume, but I'll leave this stream up as we look at the seal of the great state of Wisconsin and try and hit some of these comments here. So also when I was looking this up, I saw that, of course, the defense can have its experts, but the court can appoint an expert to evaluate insanity. The court itself, so that's interesting. And here it says, so here we don't have problems getting expert witnesses to testify dollars on that. Yeah, I guess not. Maybe they have a ready supply up there, or who knows, with the rates being charged, the rates being paid, or what have you. I don't know. What was the provocation for attacking her previous attorney? I'm not aware of one, other than maybe she was butthurt of the progress of the case. But in theory, if you're trying to say you're insane, having a rational reason to punch somebody is not the best reason to punch somebody. So maybe no apparent provocation is what she was gunning for there. Or she's actually crazy. I will say my general advice to clients is you're testifying from the moment you leave your house, right? You don't want to road rage somebody who turns out to be a juror, or shut the elevator door on somebody who's, going to end up in the courtroom, especially when you're in a courtroom. in the courtroom the whole day long. The jury can look at you any moment they want to. What message are you sending them when they look at you, right? When you're not on a stand. So, not that I would be coaching her to pretend to be insane, but my point is, if she's insane, I agree that a consistent level of behavior would be the best way to go there. If she wants to appear insane, now if she is insane, she could be calm one minute and go bonkers at some point, depending on how her mental state declines. I can't comment on that. There certainly are people who suffer from these issues. I don't know about her personally. I do believe that she was on drugs or said she was on drugs at the time she committed this crime, which does not help you really legally or help you in your insanity defense either, because how about not being on drugs? So now it did say, I do think I remember this when you're saying on the comment, she got the attorney to withdraw his counsel, and maybe she wanted to delay or didn't like the guy, and that's certainly possible. But I think they also made a motion then, her new lawyers, we need a new judge because this judge saw her attack an attorney, so how can he be biased? But the judge said, nah, I'm fine. I don't have any problem giving her a fair trial. So I don't know about that. See if I had some more notes up here on it, because we actually covered a lot of it. I just didn't want to miss the start. So we've gone over the fact that she's going to be in the guilt phase and not the insanity phase, so we won't have to worry about that. When she goes to the insanity phase, which it only is if she's found guilty unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt here, then she'll go to the insanity phase, which only requires 10 out of 12 jurors to agree one way or the other. Burden is on her there and not the state. And they're going to do what's called opening statements. And remember, she can't, opening statements are not opening arguments. You have an opening statement, closing argument, and you have a lot of latitude in an argument that you don't necessarily have in an opening statement. Kind of depends on opposing counsel and how they want to object and stuff. So in theory, on an opening statement, you outline your theory of the case and how the evidence is going to support that, or maybe if you're a defense attorney, where you think you're going to show the holes in the evidence that the state has. It's a little different in criminal cases, but 30 minutes, that seems very fair. This crime is terrible, right? But it's not a complicated investigation, okay? So I think she lost her motions in limine to keep her statements out and some of the evidence out. So if the statements come in of her saying, yeah, I did it, here's where you'll find this piece and that piece and all that. Again, I'm not sure what the defense can do here on the guilt phase other than argue intent, that she killed him, but she didn't mean to kill him. And that's going to be very tough because this was by no means an accident. And if you want to get into the mental state, you got to wait till the second phase of the trial if you want to say she was bonkers or whatever. So we will see on that. So it is 8:30 there. So let's all take a moment of silence for the jurors. Have to be there early for this. And the kind of case they're going to set in, while this is very salacious to even hear about it and see the pieces we've seen, the jury's not going to be spared that. They're going to see a lot of the graphic details and all of that. So that's a terrible case to get called for, I think. That's for sure. So they'll try, and I know the court TV and the other people will try and make sure that doesn't impede this. All right, so they are moving at a fast rate. That's good. Let's get the volume back here. What's up? All right, we're back in the game. Oops. How about that?
Stay standing till everybody gets in. I could see you talking about it, so no problem. All right, be seated.
Here we go.
Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a good weekend. The first thing we're going to do here this morning is administer the juror's oath. So I'm going to ask all of you to stand up and raise your right hand.
So this is when Jeopardy attaches.
You and each of you do solemnly swear that you will well and truly try the issue between the plaintiff and the defendant and a true verdict give according to law and the evidence in court, so help you God.
Have a seat. The next thing I want to do, ladies and gentlemen, is briefly explain to you about the process. We have obviously 16 jurors. There's only going to be 12 that are going to be in deliberations. For those of you who aren't familiar with that process, we have a number of alternates. The purpose of an alternate is to ensure that if someone takes ill or can't return or for any reason finds that they can no longer participate in the process, we will continue to have 12. Because if we drop below 12, the trial has to end and we need to start over. That's why we have 4 extra. At the end of the first phase of this trial, the computer will randomly select 4 of you who are going to be excused and won't participate in the deliberations. That's the purpose of the alternate, and that's the purpose of having 16 instead of 12 right off the bat. I gave you a number of instructions on Friday. And I want to give you one more instruction here this morning to help you better understand the process. In this case, Taylor Schabusiness has entered 2 pleas to the charges in this case: not guilty and not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. The law requires that the issues raised by the 2 pleas be decided in a continuous trial that is separated into 2 phases. Your verdict will be taken at the end of each phase. You are to consider only the issues presented to you during each phase. You are not to consider any issues other than those presented to you for each verdict. In the first phase of the trial, you will be asked to determine whether the defendant is guilty of the charges of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault. You will make this determination solely upon the facts which deal with the actual incident alleged in the information. During this first phase, you will not be asked to determine whether at the time of the incident the defendant was suffering from mental disease or defect. If, after the first phase of the trial, you find the defendant not guilty, the trial will be over. If you find the defendant guilty, the trial will move to a second phase. During the second phase, you will be asked to determine whether the defendant is responsible for criminal conduct. Wisconsin law provides that a person is not responsible for criminal conduct if, at the time it was committed, the person had a mental disease or defect and as a result lacked substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of the conduct or to conform the conduct to the requirements of the law. If the trial proceeds into this second phase, you will be instructed more fully as to your duties at that time. We'll now begin the first phase of the trial, and I again caution you that this first phase is concerned solely with the question of whether the defendant committed the crimes of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault as set forth in the information. The lawyers will now make opening statements. The purpose of an opening statement is to give the lawyers an opportunity to tell you what they expect the evidence will show so that you will better understand the evidence as it is introduced during the trial. I must caution you, however, that the opening statements are not evidence. Having said that, Mr. Saunders, are you prepared to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good morning. The evidence in this case will show that in the early morning of February 22nd of 2022, the defendant strangled her friend Shad Therian to death using a dog collar. That after he was dead, engaged in sexual acts with him, with his body, subsequently dismembered him using kitchen knives found in the home. Over the next few days, in the first phase of trial, the state of Wisconsin, myself, District Attorney Lassay, will present a number of witnesses who will testify about what happened in this case, and that'll show and demonstrate to you that the defendant committed these acts. You'll hear testimony and evidence will show that in the early morning of February 23rd, is a Tuesday, kind of a normal cold February in Wisconsin, at a house on Stony Brook Lane. It's sort of, if you know the area, the west side of Green Bay, Fireman's Park, West Mason Street, that area. Tara Packanich is kind of in her home and is awoken by a storm door shut. There's a door that's sort of abuts the garage, driveway to the residence, normal single-family home in the area. Hears a storm door close and is awoken from sleep. It's early morning, 2:30, 3 a.m., somewhere in there. She goes and gets up. It kind of wakes her up, and she's aware at that point that her son, Shad, was in the basement with a friend, Taylor. They had been over the day before, February 22nd, February 21st, in that time frame. And she kind of goes and sees what's going on, right? We hear this noise late in the night, early in the morning, and she sees the basement light is on. At that point, she's aware that, they were down there throughout the day of the 22nd, and she goes down and sees, because the light's on in the basement, and she's seeing what's going on. And you'll see sort of the scene. Sort of go down the stairs to a normal basement. It's partially finished on one half, partially like a utility area, laundry, that kind of storage area. And right next to the stairs, there's a 5-gallon bucket that you'd get at a home center. And she lifts a towel that's covering the bucket. It's like a beach towel. And unfortunately, sees essentially a mother's worst nightmare. That her son's head is in the bucket. Understandably, you'll hear testimony about that and the shock that caused. Tara goes and talks to her boyfriend who lives in the home, Steve. You'll hear from him. He goes and checks too, and ultimately they call 911. And that's how this case comes to be. You'll hear from the officers this morning, likely, who arrived on scene and what they observed, obviously confirming the information that was reported to law enforcement about Shad's circumstances, how they find the bucket, and it has parts of Shad as well as knives. You'll hear about, at that point, a relative lack of other indicia of a crime occurred. It's not a significant amount of blood on the walls and on the floor. There's some, you'll hear about that, but it takes law enforcement time to see what actually happened, the full extent of what the defendant did in this case. By that point, they're actually interviewing the defendant, and she's providing them information that, no, Shad's still in the basement. The rest of him is still in the basement. And ultimately, you'll hear about what officers find in that basement. There's, as I mentioned, the living area has some mattresses, blood-soaked. Once you remove the blankets, other clothing items. There's a tote, a teal tote, kind of a larger Tupperware that has knives as well as body parts of Shad. There's bags, a sort of duffel bag type item, a backpack, all of which contain parts of Shad's body, as well as knives that were used in the dismemberment. And you'll hear all about that. The officers who responded on scene and processed the evidence, ultimately locating the parts of Shad. You'll hear about then other things that are found. Signs of methamphetamine use, which the defendant later acknowledges happened with her and Shad right before this crime occurred. Cleaning products. As I mentioned, you may have an idea in your head of this crime and what that looks like and what law enforcement would encounter when they got there, and you'll see what actually encountered. You'll hear about Clorox wipes and how the defendant would go to the shower and sort of clean up and use a squeegee and clean up the scene. You'll hear about the medical examiner and their team who arrive and are dealing with this situation, and it's determined that not all of Shad is located in the basement. There's certain parts that are missing, and ultimately in the van that the defendant is driving, gold minivan, there's additional legs of Shad found in that van. You'll hear from Dr. Vincent Tranquita. He's our medical examiner at the time, and he will testify about cause and manner of death. And you'll hear about the cause being strangulation. Significant force applied to the neck, significant signs of strangulation that you'll hear about, and then ultimately, obviously, a significant amount of dismemberment after the fact. You'll hear Dr. Tranquita talk about that. That's all happening at Stony Brook. And 23rd, throughout that day, you'll hear about significant investigation that goes on at that house. And then you'll hear about then, a few hours after that initial 911 call, how law enforcement kind of gets word that, Shad was with the defendant, Ms. Schabusiness, before this offense, and they locate her at her apartment on Eastman Avenue, sort of on the other side of Green Bay, east side. Encountered as she's leaving the apartment that she shares with another person. And you'll see that encounter, how the defendant is essentially literally caught red-handed, blood on her hands. There's a significant knife wound that she talks about later was suffered in the course of the crimes. There's blood on her clothing. There's black sweatshirt, black sweatpants. And she talks with law enforcement for a pretty significant amount of time. Detective David Groff, who's seated at counsel table here, interviews the defendant along with another detective, and they start to learn more about what happened in this case and sort of the hours leading up to the crimes. Again, it's a significant and lengthy interview, and the defendant's providing information that you'll see jives with what law enforcement's encountering in that basement. She admits to, as I mentioned, methamphetamine use before this. She and Shad were sort of hanging out beforehand. They were friends from school back in the day, and it seems like they were in a friendly state at the time of this offense. And you'll hear then they go to the Stony Brook Lane home and go to the basement. They're let in by Steve. You'll hear about that in the early morning of the 22nd. You'll hear the defendant describe that what apparently begins as a somewhat sexual encounter escalates to a dog collar being placed around Shad's neck. And the defendant quite vividly describes what she then did. She's yanking on the chain. She's describing what's happening to Shad. It's evidence that you'll hear, and you'll hear it from the defendant's own mouth, that shows that this is an intentional act. It's not one pull of a gun trigger. It's an intense act. You'll hear about that from Vincent Tranquita, Dr. Tranquita as well. She's pulling harder, just hoping that he eventually passes, and it takes a significant amount of time. It takes several minutes, so you'll hear her say. After that, after Shad's deceased, she describes what she then does with his body, again, engaging in sexual acts, ultimately dismembering him quite significantly. She reports that afterwards, that law enforcement would have fun finding all the body parts that are located throughout the basement, told law enforcement where to find certain body parts. Like I said, it wasn't obvious to law enforcement who initially respond to that basement what happened. It's information being provided by the defendant that later is corroborated by law enforcement. You'll hear the defendant admit to cleaning up, avoiding guilt, avoiding responsibility for this. You'll hear her talk about that. You'll see the signs of that, as I mentioned earlier. That dismemberment process takes that entire day of the 22nd, essentially. As I mentioned, Tara wakes up to Taylor leaving at about 2:33 a.m. on the 23rd. The investigation doesn't stop there, despite the defendant's confessions. Law enforcement continues. They send DNA to the lab, and it confirms the accounts that we're getting here. Blood on the defendant's hands, left and right hands, or Shad's. Blood on the knives, some of the knives that are used is Shad's. The clothing item, as I mentioned, the black sweatshirt, black sweatpants, has red substances, blood on the sweatpants, all consistent with what happened, with the defendant's statements, with what law enforcement's seeing. So this case is really not a whodunit. You'll hear about the crimes that clearly occurred. You'll hear the defendant's statement saying, yep, I did it. And you have DNA evidence and other investigative tools that kind of corroborate everything else. So for this, the defendant's charged with the 3 crimes that the judge read off earlier. First-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse or dismembering the corpse, and then third-degree sexual assault. So we'll get into what that all means later. We'll have closing arguments where we kind of provide summation and provide all that to you. But for now, as you kind of listen to the evidence, count 1, the state needs to prove that the defendant caused the death of Shad and that she did so intentionally. As I mentioned, you're going to hear a lot about that. And it's nothing but intentional. This is not an accident. This is not a mistake. It's a significant act the defendant did. Dismembering a corpse for the purpose of concealing a crime, you'll hear a lot about that. And third-degree sexual assault, how she engaged in oral contact with Shad's body and inserted objects in his body as well after the fact. I know in voir dire, some of you talked about, you've heard some about this case, and that's to be expected potentially. It's really important to stress that our system of justice is not based on media accounts, on word of mouth, on what you hear. The evidence is what happens in these 4 walls and what you hear and see. And ultimately, the evidence in this case will point to one area. The defendant is guilty of these 3 crimes. So again, this is just meant to be an overview on the evidence we expect you to hear over the next few days in the first phase. But ultimately, the case comes down to choices and responsibility. The defendant made a series of choices, February 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Choices to use methamphetamine, choices to kill her friend, Shad, choices to then utterly degrade him after the fact. The choices the defendant made. And when we come back in closing arguments later this week at some point, we'll argue to you that the evidence in this case is clear. The choices the defendant made indicate that you're not going to have a reasonable doubt about what the defendant did, that she's guilty of all 3 crimes. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Freilich, are you prepared to make an opening statement?
Yes, I am, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Your Honor, may it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Lassay, Mr. Saunders. Thank you for your service as jurors. We definitely appreciate you being here, serving on the jury, because a jury is an integral part of the court process. Without you jurors, our court system simply couldn't function. The lawyers couldn't do their job, and the court couldn't do its job. So we appreciate your time, your attention to detail, and your anticipated focus over the next several days that you're going to put into this very serious case. Now, in this case, the state of Wisconsin, through the Brown County District Attorney's Office, has the complete burden of proof. The state must prove to all of you jurors, beyond a reasonable doubt, each and every element of the crimes charged beyond a reasonable doubt. The United States Constitution presumes that every person who is accused of a crime is presumed to be innocent. And in this case, Taylor Schabusiness is presumed to be innocent. She doesn't have to prove anything. The defense does not have to prove anything in this case. Why? Because the complete burden of proof rests with the District Attorney's Office, with the state of Wisconsin. They have to prove up all the facts. And in this case, you're going to hear a lot of different facts. You're going to hear a lot of different accounts from witnesses, citizen witnesses, detectives, police officers, experts, DNA analysts, medical examiners, all of that. You're going to have to take all of that information into consideration when you deliberate. But the entire burden rests with the state in this case. My client, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, also has an absolute right to remain silent. Under the law, she has a right not to testify if she so chooses, and if she elects not to testify, you cannot use that fact alone against her in this trial. She doesn't have to testify, but she may testify. In this particular case, ladies and gentlemen, Taylor Denise Schabusiness was friends with Shad. They went to high school together. They went to school at Bayport, and they had classes together. And they were, when they were younger, they dated for a short period of time. But basically, they were friends. You're going to hear some testimony on, it was a Wednesday, February 23rd of 2022. You're going to hear, I believe, a 911 tape. You're going to hear testimony from Tara Packanich and Stephen Hendricks. They live at 829 Stony Brook Lane in Green Bay. There was a call from Mr. Hendricks that he apparently went downstairs in the basement and saw a bucket, saw a human head in the bucket, and he had checked it out because his significant other, Tara Packanich, had initially went down there and saw this and had him go check. He didn't have glasses on, but he apparently called 911, and that caused the officers to come to the scene at 829 Stony Brook Lane. And there'll be some testimony about this residence. It's a small, quaint home. It's got a loft upstairs where I believe Tara Packanich and Stephen Hendricks were sleeping. Then it has a floor level with kitchen, living area, and then it has a basement. And there will be testimony, we believe, that Stephen Hendricks last saw Shad at the house on Monday night, which I believe would have been February 21st of 2022. He will indicate that, both of them will indicate that they really did not see Taylor Schabusiness leave. They heard a vehicle start, a door slam, caused them to wake up. Officer Wanish, you'll hear from him. He came to the house and went down the basement to make some observations. That the officers did a protective sweep. They walked around the basement and the entire house to see if there were any other people there on February 23rd, 2022. And the only people that were there were Tara Packanich, the owner, Stephen Hendricks, and daughter Ava Wheelock. Those people were there. No Taylor Schabusiness was there. She wasn't in the basement. She wasn't anywhere in the house. But obviously there was some investigation, and evidence was apparently found. And it's true that law enforcement officers didn't have a clear picture or clear understanding of what was really happening or what happened, and so they're trying to figure things out as they went along. There would be some testimony from other officers with regards to the other scene, which is 2353 Eastman Avenue in Green Bay. That, I submit, was Taylor Schabusiness's apartment, and she lived there with Scott Thoms, T-H-O-M-S. And law enforcement officers came over there, and my client came out of the apartment complex, and she was arrested. She had a warrant. She was taken into a squad car and taken down to the Green Bay Police Department for questioning by Detective Groff and Detective Kevin Kempf. Also, law enforcement arrested the other person in apartment one, that was Taylor's apartment, Scott Thoms, and he was ordered to lay on the ground, and he was taken into custody as well. You'll hear from lots of different officers, in this case law enforcement officers. The officers found a gold Chrysler Town and Country minivan, I believe 2006, and they found it parked in the Eastman Avenue parking lot, and there were some concerns about it. Now, this vehicle is owned by Scott Thoms, and I believe that will come out that he was the one that owned that vehicle. But inside that vehicle, there was a crock pot box, and there were some human body parts in there. In this particular case, you'll also hear from Dr. Tranchita. He's the medical examiner, did a lot of investigative work, looking at cause and manner of death of the deceased. So you'll hear about all of his findings. You're also going to hear from Kevin Scott. He's the DNA analyst for the state of Wisconsin Crime Lab, and his testimony, I believe, will show that he took various swabs as part of the DNA analysis, and items were swabbed. There were sweatpants, there were blades, there were light switch, there's boxes, hands, people's mouths, and a dildo, because that was found. The swab of the dildo, he will testify, I believe, that the possible contribution of DNA from Shatherian as it relates to the dildo is inconclusive due to the complexity of the mixture. So the state is going to argue that there was a sexual assault by use of the dildo, and the deceased DNA is not on it. So that's something you'll have to take into consideration. You're going to hear from Sergeant Kurt Brester from the Green Bay Police Department. He was dispatched to 829 Stony Brook Lane regarding a suspicious situation on February 23rd, 2022, and that he conferred with Officer Wanish outside, that he had contact with Tara Packanich and Stephen Hendricks, and that he did a protective sweep of the residence, and they didn't find anybody else other than Ava Wheelock, who was the young lady, she's 16, sleeping in a bedroom. You're going to hear from, I believe, Officer T.J. Buckman, that he arrived on the scene as a supervisor to this apartment complex, and he actually went to 2353 Eastman Avenue in Green Bay, and he saw that gold van parked outside, and he had several other officers keep the van under surveillance, and at least from his initial investigation, he did not have enough information to determine whether or not Taylor Schabusiness was the suspect or the victim. And so those are some other things that you're going to have to take a look at and think about. You're going to see the videotape in this case where there was a lengthy video down at the Green Bay Police Department between Detective Groff and Detective Kempf and my client, Taylor Denise Schabusiness. And they talked, and Detective Groff asked her lots of questions about what she knew and her whereabouts and what may or may not have happened. So you have to pay close attention to that and think about the things that are said. In a case like this, and really in any case, you have to assess the credibility of each and every witness. You have to take all of that into consideration in this matter. I'd ask that you, when you're considering all of the evidence, don't jump to conclusions. Don't rush to judgment. Please keep an open mind. Listen to all the facts. Listen to what every witness has to say carefully and weigh what they have to say. And remember, there's always two sides to every story. You jurors are going to have to decipher the facts of what may have occurred or what didn't occur. But at the end of the case, we ask that you find our client not guilty on all the counts. Thank you.
And then, Mr. Saunders, are you ready to call your first witness? Yes.
Let's do it then.
Your Honor, may we have just a very brief sidebar before the first witness?
There we go. It's not real court if there's not some delay, at least a small one. Those people on that seal there, it's a little weird looking on my screen. I've got a second monitor that makes that quite large. If that was first place and designed the people for our seal contest, I'd hate to see second place. So let's see if there's any questions. The opening's kind of straightforward, fairly clinical for such a horrible crime, right? Fairly clinical. And so the case is in motion, but no drama so far. And I guess maybe it'll be like that, depending on who they call us the first witness. I saw this hand here, this leg there, this head here, this knife here. And then, of course, I think she confessed all this to the police. So, again, I'm not sure what's really going to happen here for the defense side, what the not guilty part of this is, if it's not just intent. That was quick. Congratulations to the attorneys for keeping that. Oh, he's got a scales of justice up there on the bench. Man, this judge.
Your Honor, the state calls
Yeah, go on.
Amy Shannon.
Yeah, no death penalty, and life doesn't necessarily mean life. There's a whole process they go through, and the statutes are complicated. Giving the court administrator a little shout out there. Clerk, she's going to swear this person in.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God. Please
You put your hand on a printer in Wisconsin.
Amy Shannon.
Before we go on, it wouldn't be a jury trial if we didn't have technical problems. So there's going to be an audio played shortly, and we're having a hard time getting the audio on. So I'm just going to, we're going to take a minute and see if we can, if we can't get it done quickly, I'm going to excuse the jury and call somebody up who can pick it up.
Is there any place on the planet that isn't the government that has a water container like that? The gold with the black around it? Maybe that came off Mad Men. Maybe it's in some shows and stuff. I just don't ever see it anywhere else. Yes. I swear upon this HP laser jet that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you, PDF. Yeah, this was something I mentioned yesterday. Another Wisconsin case, so much crime there. It's a little unfair to judge, say, Wisconsin or Florida based on this because they broadcast so many trials and a lot of states don't. So it looks worse there than it is in proportion to other places. I think all states have the crazies that do crazy things. I'm informed that container is an old coffee thermos. Yeah, I don't know who this lady is yet. She hasn't had to say yet.
Again, so it's rebooting. I'm not sure exactly how long that's going to take, but
It should take about 3 days to reboot. So they have an audio for her to listen to, and they want to make sure that's ready to go when they get into the questioning.
Does the court wish that I make the sort of foundational questions? They're relatively brief.
sure, why don't we do that? That will give us some more time. So go ahead, Mr. Lezay.
Thank you. Ms. Shannon, can you state for the record how you are employed?
I'm the Assistant Director for Brown County Public Safety Communications. It's the 911 Dispatch Center.
Can you just explain for the jury how the 911 dispatch center works in Brown County and how it relates to the other law enforcement agencies?
So the 911 Center takes the calls for all law enforcement, ambulance services, and fire departments within Brown County. As part of that, all calls and radio traffic that come in through our center are recorded, and then they are held in our center as evidence for 120 days. As were requested by agencies, we release that evidence back to them because it's technically their evidence. We're just the holders of that evidence.
And if a law enforcement agency makes a request that you retain a particular call or record, is that something that your agency does?
We do.
And are those calls, are they something that are easily discernible by the date and the location of the call?
Yes.
Does the system actually store the location of a phone call that comes in?
It depends on how it comes in, but yes.
And essentially, are you able to serve as a record keeper or records custodian for the 911 center, given your current role?
That is part of my role, is to be the records custodian.
And how long have you worked with the 911 center overall?
Overall, over 10 years.
And were you asked by the Green Bay Police Department to record and maintain a call from February 22nd, actually February 23rd, 2022, I believe, at 3:24 a.m.?
Yes.
And as part of your work with the 911 center, did you have an opportunity to review a recorded phone call that came in on February 23rd at 3:24 a.m. from a residence located at 829 Stony Brook Lane?
Yes,
You had a chance to listen to that entire call?
I did.
And if we played that phone call for you, would you be able to identify that call?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would like to have that call used as an exhibit.
Any objection?
Well, I didn't hear what he said.
He wants to offer the recording as an exhibit, and then he wants to play it.
I have no objection.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are about to hear an audio recording. Recordings are proper evidence, and you may consider them just as any other evidence. Please listen carefully. Some parts might be hard to understand.
County Public Safety, how may I help you?
Yes, I'd like an officer at 829 Stony Brook. Girlfriend just woke me up and swears that she found her severed head of her son in the basement.
Okay, can you repeat the address, sir?
829 Stony Brook.
Okay, S-T-O-N-E-Y?
Is it EY, right? Yes. No E. Just L-Y.
Is that a house, apartment, or duplex?
It's a house.
What's your phone number?
My number is 327-3748. My name is Steve.
327-3748?
Yes.
What's your last name, Steve?
Hendricks.
Okay, tell me what's happening there again?
I have no clue what's happening. My girl swears that she's found her severed head of her son in the basement.
Did you go down there?
In a bucket. I went down, I can't tell what the fuck it is. Part of my language, I'm kind of a little freaked out.
Okay, did she just wake up and say that?
Yeah.
And whose head is it?
She's claiming it's her son.
How old is her son?
24, 25?
Has he been missing, or?
No, yeah, he was here yesterday with some chick, and then all of a sudden nobody's here. And she came up to use the restroom a couple times, and she keeps calling and calling, and now she's saying that she hears the phone down there too.
Okay, is she with you right now?
Yes, she's upstairs. She's a little freaked out, and I don't know what to do.
Okay, all right, just get in line. And, you said you went down there, correct?
Yeah, and I lifted the towel, but I can't see very well, and I can't tell what the hell it is.
So there's something in the bucket?
There's something in the goddamn bucket there.
Okay.
If she won't look again, I don't know what the hell, man.
Do you think she's hallucinating, or do you think that?
I don't think so. I went down and there's something in the damn bucket. I don't know, man. And she's a little freaked out and kind of freaking me out.
What's your girlfriend's last name?
Packanich.
How do you spell that?
Oh, holy shit. You want to spell it? P-A-K-A-N-I-C-H.
N-I-C-H. What's her first name?
Tara. T-A-R-A.
What's her middle initial, date of birth?
What's your middle initial? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yep.
Okay. What's her date of birth?
What's your date of birth? 5/14/74.
All right, can I talk to her?
Yes, you can.
Hello?
Hi, Tara. So can you tell me what's going on?
Are you positive my son's head is in a bucket, a young bucket in my basement?
What makes you think that?
Because I looked in the bucket,
And what did you see?
exactly what I told you.
Okay, where's the rest of the body at?
No idea.
Okay. When's the last time you saw your son?
Well, I guess today is Wednesday, so I picked him up from his dad's on Monday. And because he doesn't normally stay here, he was going to stay here for a few days, but I left the laundry. He was here a couple hours, then he left with Taylor, and they
What's
Taylor,
Who's that?
girl, Taylor Coronado,
You know how to spell her last name?
Coronado. No, not exactly, but it's the common spelling from around here.
All right, that is
He
girl.
went to middle school and high school with her. I don't know if he doesn't live with me.
When's the last time you saw him?
Well, he left with her. They both came back. I believe they both came back while we were sleeping Monday night. And I assume they slept all day yesterday, so I haven't seen him since Monday night physically. I thought they were sleeping all day. I was gone for a little while yesterday, Tuesday, and he's 25, and I'm going to basement.
All right.
What are you doing? You know what I mean?
Well, we've got help.
And then I heard my door and her minivan start, and I went downstairs and I went to the bathroom. The lights were out in the basement. I turned them off, and I looked around and no one was there. So then when I turned around to come back upstairs, there was a 5-gallon bucket with a towel over it. And I'm like, oh great, that's why they were out here all day yesterday. They were pissing in a bucket. And I looked, and that is not what was in that bucket.
What is your son's name?
Shadirian,
C-H-A-D.
S-H-A-D,
How do you spell his last name?
T-H-Y-R-I-O-N,
What's his date of birth?
9797.
Is there,
Honestly, I think.
is there blood down there?
No.
Okay. All right, ma'am. I have officers that are headed over to your house right now, okay?
Head over.
Okay, I'll go down there.
I guess just stay away from it. Just stay away.
Stay from that area, but we're on the second level, so we're gonna go down to the kitchen and not to the basement.
Okay,
We
yeah.
can answer the doors and stuff.
Okay, all right, ma'am.
My 16-year-old daughter is sleeping.
Excuse me?
My 16-year-old daughter is here sleeping.
Okay.
They do not make a lot of noise. I don't know.
Okay, just let them know that. I'm sure they won't try, okay?
My heart can jump out of my head for being so.
And, I mean, you're sure it couldn't be like a fake head or something?
I'm not touching it. I'm not looking at it again.
Okay. All right, ma'am. Just go ahead and wait for the officers, okay?
Okay.
All right.
The old fake head in the bucket trick.
Ms. Shannon, the audio recording that was just played, is that consistent with the recording that was retained by the 911 center for the call from the address on Stony Brook Drive on February 23rd of 2022?
Yes.
Your Honor, for the record, I believe that we played the entirety of the audio recording, which is 7 minutes and 13 seconds. I would ask that the recording be admitted as an exhibit.
Any objection, Mr. Fraley?
No.
All right, that exhibit will be received.
I have no further questions for Ms. Shannon.
All right, Mr. Fraley, cross-examination?
Sure. Ms. Shannon, morning.
Good morning.
How is a recording like that kept by the 911 dispatch center?
All calls and radio traffic coming into our center are recorded automatically. We have a recording system. And regardless of how it's coming in, phone or radio, it's recorded. And it stays in that recording. We have it set for 180 days.
Okay. Do you, at least for the recording that we just heard, was that then downloaded to a disk or something?
Yes. And then we also keep it on a separate drive to make sure that it doesn't go away, because those do automatically clear after 180 days. So we downloaded it to a disk as evidence, and then we also keep a recording of it in-house.
So is it your testimony that you preserved that tape from February 23rd of 2022?
Yes.
And then it was, what, was it sent to the Green Bay Police Department, the district attorney's office. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
It was sent to the district attorney's office,
And then they kept it in their custody?
as far as I know.
Okay. But 911 dispatch center still has a copy as well?
Yes.
Was there any way that that recording was altered in any way?
No.
Do only certain people have access to it?
Yes.
Who was that?
Myself, and then we have a group of supervisors. They are the people who make the recordings. We have one person who is assigned to do it, but if he's not there, then any of the supervisors can. But they're the only ones that have access to that drive.
That 911 tape that we just heard, it wasn't excised or modified in any way, shape, or form, was it?
No.
And it was downloaded off the mainframe computer at the dispatch
The
center?
server, yes,
Okay, off the server?
yes.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, one more. This was kept in the regular course of business of the 911 dispatch center?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am, you're excused.
Well, that was highly efficient. Got it done. I even had a reboot to get the tape played.
State's next witness.
The state calls Officer Alex Wanish.
And just because that dispatcher was continuing to ask questions doesn't mean that he hadn't already dispatched people there. Keep them on the line and keep talking. To be fair to that person.
Officer, if you just want to step right up over here, and before you have a seat, turn and face her and raise your right hand. She'll place you under oath.
Should place you under oath on the printer, sir.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Officer Alex Wanish, W-A-N-I-S-H.
Okay, and then if you could just make sure you stay close to the microphone so we can all hear you. And with that, Mr. Saunders, the witness is yours.
Thank you. Officer, how are you employed?
With the City of Green Bay Police Department as a patrol officer.
And how long have you been employed as a patrol officer with Green Bay PD?
Since April of 2019.
And is that the totality of your law enforcement experience?
I worked about a year and a half prior to that with City of Manitowoc.
So about 2017 is when your law enforcement career started?
Correct.
And can you outline for us what training you received to be a police officer?
I went through the 720 Academy at NWTC. Before that, I went to UW-Platteville for my 4-year bachelor degree in criminal justice.
And what are some of your regular duties as a police officer?
Taking any dispatch call that comes out, traffic, that kind of stuff.
Sort of respond to the initial incidents?
Correct.
And then do you kind of conduct follow-through investigation as well?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Officer, I want to ask you about February 23rd of 2022. Do you recall if you were working in that capacity on that day?
Yes, I was.
Directing your attention to about 3:25 a.m., were you dispatched to a call around that time?
Yes.
To where were you dispatched?
The address was 829 Stony Brook, City of Green Bay, Brown County.
And is that an area of Green Bay that you're familiar with in your regular patrol duties?
Yes, it is.
And I guess what area of Green Bay is that?
It's the west side, I guess the closest major intersection between Mason and Military.
And what was the reason you were dispatched to that residence?
The initial call came out that the complainant's girlfriend found her son's severed head in a bucket in the basement.
And did you arrive at the Stony Brook Lane residence?
Yes, I did.
But were any other officers with you in that initial time period?
Officer Plonky arrived at the same time as I did.
And what happened when you got to the residence?
We made contact with the complainant and then his girlfriend, and we started talking to them. And then we were directed to the basement where the bucket was located. Officer Plonky remained upstairs just to keep an eye on the rest of the house. I went downstairs. At the bottom of the stairs to the right, there was a green bucket with a shower towel on top of it, just to verify we had an actual head in the bucket. Lifted the towel off, and there was, in fact, a human severed head in the bucket.
So I want to back up just a little bit. When you got to the residence, you said you met with the complainant was that Stephen Hendricks?
Correct.
Okay, and then you said his girlfriend was also present?
Yes.
And who is that person?
First name of
Identified?
Tara.
Tara, okay. And Officer Plonky stayed with those individuals? Is that
Correct.
right? Okay, and then you went down to the basement?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And you mentioned observing the bucket. I guess where in the basement was that located?
As you go down the stairs, if you turn to the immediate right, it was at the bottom of the stairs to the right.
Was it in pretty close proximity to the stairs?
Yes.
After you made that observation, what did you do?
After I pulled the towel off,
Yes.
I had Officer Plunky come downstairs and just verify we had in fact found a human head in the bucket. And then we started to notify a supervisor and then ask for additional units.
And at that time, on February 23rd, 2022, did your department utilize body-worn cameras?
Yes.
Is that something that was operating on that day?
Yes.
And did you have the chance to review your body-worn camera prior to your testimony today?
Yes, I did.
That's
If
terrible.
you were able to observe that here in court, would you be able to recognize it?
Yes, I'll be able to.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd propose to play Exhibit 2. It's approximately 6 minutes.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thanks, Gil.
All right, I am playing Exhibit 2, beginning at 0 seconds.
Okay. Did you both see this? I opened the towel, I picked up the towel and dropped it, because I don't know what the fuck it is, man. I have bad vision, and she's like, is that what I think it is? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. What the fuck is it?
Do you want to stay with those two? I'll just go see you.
Where's it at? Go right there. Look right, there's a bucket with a towel on it. I looked up there today.
Just keep
Nice job by the camera operator to switch off of that before it gets there. Well, it's back.
Come here. Hold on one second. hold on, just. That's real, right? That's real low. Oh, I got 4 Ed 1 to 82 Sam. I know you're busy over there, but this is actually what it's going to be. It's not going to be a 961 thing or a 96 thing, so we're going to need more units here. That's real dumb. If there's anybody it's supposed to be.
Absolutely crazy to find that. Oh my God.
Was that Fred 1? No, for right now. If we could get more units here sooner rather than later, that'd be appreciated. We've got quite a bit of blood down here. I want to clear this rest of this house. We've got 2 people in the house for sure.
So he has seen a lot of blood. He hasn't, yeah, they haven't been showing that, which is good. And this guy was choked to death first, I think. So that's going to affect how you have blood flow when the other stuff starts. I mean, they don't know what's going on. They don't know if the person who did this is still in the house or what. But he said there is quite a bit of blood. I just haven't shown it on the screen. But I think there won't be any lack of evidence of what went on.
Okay, and for the record, the entirety of Exhibit 2, approximately 5 minutes, 59 seconds was played. Officer, having reviewed the exhibit, do you recognize the video that was depicted?
Yes, I do.
Does that appear to be consistent with your body-worn camera footage that you observed?
Yes, it is.
And does that appear to also be consistent with your recollection of the scene on Stony Brook Lane on February 23rd?
Correct.
I'd move Exhibit 2.
Any objection?
No objection.
The Exhibit 2 will be received.
So, Officer, I want to ask a few questions about that. When you arrived, which door to the residence did you enter through?
It would have been the side door off the driveway.
Okay. And was there a sort of a storm door that was a part of that door as well?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. After you observed the bucket, it appeared that you walked around the basement area of the residence. Is that right?
Yes, it did.
At that point, did you see any other parts of a human body?
No other parts of a human body, no.
Okay. Did you notice any areas of potential blood?
Yes.
And where was that?
Beyond the stack of mattresses, there appeared to be blood on the floor and then small chunks of human flesh.
Okay. In other areas of that basement, did you locate any obvious signs of blood?
There was a dried blood stain on the mattresses, and that was all that I remember seeing.
After you and Officer Plonky, was that the officer who was also depicted in that video?
Yes, it is.
Did other officers arrive on scene?
Yes.
And what did you and the other officers do at that point?
Sergeant Brester was next to arrive on scene. Kind of informed him of what we had up to this point and then what we needed to do next. We had 2 other officers responding. Once we got all the officers there that we needed, we conducted a protective sweep of the residence just to make sure there was no other people that we needed to know about, just to make sure that there was no other potential threats.
And you're the first officer to testify, so I'll ask you this, because we've heard this term. What is a protective sweep?
It's not a search or anything like that. It's just conducting a sweep of the house just to make sure there's no other people hiding or no other threats.
So essentially a search for people?
Yeah.
Okay. Other than the towel that you lifted off the bucket, was any object moved or rummaged through by officers?
Not the initial responding officers, no.
Okay. And then at some point, do detectives and other personnel arrive on scene?
Yes.
I guess, what do you do after the protective sweep then?
We maintain the scene. Officer Linsmeyer and Officer O'Donnell transported Stephen and Tara to the police department along with their 16-year-old daughter, Ava. Sergeant Brester, Officer Plonky, and I remained on scene just to secure the scene and then wait for additional resources to respond, such as detectives.
What efforts did you undertake as part of your maintaining the scene that you referenced?
Just making sure that no one got in or out of that residence. Started a crime scene log just to keep track of who was coming and going as far as officers go. And then we ended up putting up crime scene tape around the house as well.
The crime scene log, is that something that you maintained?
Yeah, until I was relieved by day shift.
And I guess that just tracks who enters and leaves the residence?
Correct.
And there was, I think you mentioned crime scene tape that was affixed as well around the house?
Yes.
Thank you, officer. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Officer Wanish, good morning.
Morning.
You were working for the Green Bay Police Department on February 23rd of 2022, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you were on uniform patrol in a fully marked squad, correct?
Yes.
And you were dispatched over to 829 Stony Brook Lane, correct?
Correct.
That area is kind of by Fireman's Park where all the kids go sledding, correct?
Yes.
It's behind it?
It would be to the east of it.
Okay. Who dispatched you over to this location?
It was a dispatch call, and we were the only available units in the city, so Officer Plank and I responded.
Okay. And were you told that there was a suspicious situation over there?
I believe that's how the call was coded.
And the complainant was the male that you heard on there, correct?
Yes.
Did you later find him to be Stephen Hendricks?
Correct.
Who was the first person you talked to when you got to the Stony Brook Lane residence?
Female by the first name of Tara.
Was it Tara Packanich?
Yes.
And that video, the officer that first entered was Officer Plonky, correct?
That is correct.
And then you followed behind?
Yes.
And the complainant said there was something in a bucket, but he couldn't tell what it was. Is that correct?
That is what he told us.
And you talked to Tara Packanich, and she said that she thought it was her son's head in a bucket down in the basement?
That's correct.
And then did you ask where the body was?
I don't recall asking that specific question.
But after you did a search, you didn't find a body, did you?
I did not.
Okay. In the basement, you didn't find any people down there, correct?
Correct.
The only people that were at the house was Tara Packanich, Stephen Hendricks, and Tara's daughter, Ava Wheelock. Is that right?
That's correct.
And this house, is it essentially have like a basement, floor level, and then an upstairs loft?
Yes, that's accurate.
There's like kind of like 3 floors, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you arrived, you knocked on the door, that side door that we saw, correct?
Yes.
It's right off the driveway, correct?
Yes.
And this was at nighttime, correct?
Yes, it was.
About 3:25 a.m.?
Correct.
And the people that you had contact with, Tara and Stephen, were they in shock?
Yeah, they both seemed to be in a state of shock.
Had they been sleeping prior to your arrival?
They were both awake and in the kitchen when we made contact.
But before you got there, was it your understanding that they went to bed and then something happened where they woke up and then they called the police?
Yes.
Okay. And did both Mr. Hendricks and Ms. Packanich attempt to describe to you what they found or what they saw?
Yes.
Did they indicate that Shad Therian would come to the residence on Stony Brook for a few days and then would leave and come back and do laundry and things of that sort?
Yeah, they said that it was not his primary residence.
You're the first one that went down in the basement
Correct.
and you had a flashlight with you?
Yes, I did.
It's kind of a high-powered flashlight so you can see, right?
Yes.
You went down to take a closer look at the contents of the bucket?
Correct.
And when you got to the bottom of the stairs, was there a laundry room area?
Yes, as you go down the stairs, the laundry room was directly to the left.
And then there was an open room as well?
Yes.
Was the open room to the right?
Yes, it was.
And was that used for storage?
It appeared to be. And then there was a stack of mattresses in the middle of the room as well.
And at some point then you saw the bucket, correct?
Yes.
And was there anything over the bucket?
There was a striped towel.
And was it over the top of it?
Yeah, it was completely covering the inside of the bucket.
Was it your discretion or duty to move the towel?
Yes, I had to verify what we had.
Okay. Now, did you have gloves on at all?
Yes, I did.
What kind of gloves?
Just regular patrol gloves.
Okay. When did you put those gloves on, do you know?
Typically, I put them on as soon as I got out of my car to go to any call.
But for this particular night, did you have them on?
Yes, I did.
When did you put them on?
Typically, I put them on right after I get out of my car, because I believe I would have put them on at that point.
Right after you got out of the squad car?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have them on when you went in that side door?
Yes, I did.
And did you keep them on during the entire time that you were in the Stony Brook Lane house?
Yes.
You removed the towel?
I did remove the towel from the bucket.
And then at some point, did you ask Officer Plunky to come and take a look as well?
Yes, I did.
At any point in time after you were done looking, did you put the towel back?
Once it was removed from the bucket, it was not placed back on the bucket.
Was it just allowed to lay on the floor, or what? Tell me what you know about that.
I believe it was just moved to the side and it was put on the floor next to the bucket.
Do you know if anybody in the house, Mr. Hendricks or Ms. Packanich, had touched what was in the bucket or moved it in any way?
I believe they both looked at it based on what they were saying to us, as far as Stephen couldn't tell what it was and Tara was positive it was her son's head.
You asked for additional units, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you asked for a supervisor?
Yes.
Did they come right away?
Yes.
On the video, we see that you pulled out your service revolver, correct?
That's correct.
Were you doing a protective sweep to make sure nobody was in the residence in the basement?
Yes.
Did you go through the entire house to see if there was anybody else in there?
Eventually, once we had more officers on scene, we cleared the rest of the house.
Okay. Did you see Taylor Schabusiness in the house when you were there?
She was not present when I was there.
And when you were looking around in the basement, it's true that you did not observe a body or any other body parts belonging to the severed head, correct?
That is correct.
Tara's daughter was in a bedroom on the ground level, correct?
Yeah, main floor.
and she was sleeping?
Correct.
Did she get up at some point then?
Yes, during our protective sweep, she was woken up.
Okay. And then did you transport Mr. Hendricks, Miss Packanich, and Miss Wheelock to the police department, or did someone else do that?
Officer Linsmar and Officer O'Donnell completed that.
Okay. Did you maintain a crime scene log?
I started the crime scene log until I was relieved.
Okay. And who were you relieved by?
Officer Zawicki.
And then did you secure the crime scene?
Yes, we remained on scene to secure it.
Was that with Officer Plonky?
Yes.
And when you secure the crime scene, how do you do that?
We eventually put up the crime scene tape, but in the meantime, we just maintained the residence, the primary point of entry.
Now, on that video, when you're walking up the driveway, whose vehicles are in that driveway? Do you know?
I don't recall exactly who's the registered owner of those vehicles.
Do you know if the vehicles belong to Miss Packanich, Mr. Hendricks?
I don't know for certain, but it's possible.
Did you confirm if any vehicle belonging to Taylor Schabusiness was in that driveway on that particular date when you were there?
I personally did not.
Okay. And was Sergeant Brester on the scene as well?
Yes.
What was his role?
When I requested a supervisor, he was the supervisor that responded.
Okay. And did he come into the residence?
Yes, he did.
Did he go down in the basement to verify anything?
I believe he did, because he assisted with the protective sweep.
Okay. When you were there, did anything happen that would have caused the crime scene to be disturbed in any way?
No.
And did Mr. Hendricks indicate to you that he wasn't able to see what was in the bucket?
Yeah, he did mention something about difficulty with his vision.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Any redirect? No, you're. Okay, thank you. You can step down.
Well, that was efficient as well, I think. Moving pretty swiftly.
State's next witness.
State calls Officer Ethan Plonky.
So that's the officer who was shown in the body cam from this other officer, I think. I'd be surprised if it was dissimilar to what we just heard, unless he spoke with other people on the scene or something.
You want to come right up here, officer, and then before you have a seat, if you can turn and face her and raise your right hand, she'll place you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God? Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
My name is Ethan Plonky, and I work with the Green Bay Police Department.
Okay, and then, sir, if you could just make sure you stay close to the microphone so we can hear you. You're pretty close right now, so you're probably good. With that, I will, the witness is yours, Mr. Saunders.
How are you employed with the Green Bay Police Department?
I am a patrol officer.
And how long have you been employed as a patrol officer?
Just over 3 years.
Is that the entirety of your law enforcement experience?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to ask you, Officer, then about February 23rd of 2022. Do you recall if you were on duty for your department on that day?
I was.
And do you recall being dispatched to a residence on Stony Brook Lane
I
that
do.
day? And do you recall approximately what time you were dispatched?
I don't recall the exact time.
Was it like in the morning, the night, in the middle of the day?
Yes, early morning.
Okay. And why were you dispatched to that residence?
For a report of a female who had supposedly observed her son's severed head in a bucket in the basement.
And when you got to that residence, what did you do?
I made contact with the two individuals inside the residence. They were, I believe, a Stephen Hendricks and a Tara Packanich. And then myself and Officer Wanish were the first to arrive on scene and make contact with them.
And then what did you do after you met with Tara and Steve?
I asked them what had occurred, to which Tara began to tell me her side of the story. While she was telling me her story, Officer Wanish had gone to the basement to look into this bucket that she had found. And that's when he told me that he did find a severed head in the bucket.
Did you then go down to the basement as well?
I did.
And what did you observe when you got to the basement?
I observed a black 5-gallon bucket to the right of the stairs as I go down. There was a beach towel over that now had been moved away, and in that bottom of that bucket was a severed head. And that's how I located.
What did you do at that point?
I then looked around the basement. Myself and Officer Wanish decided that we were going to have to clear the residence for any other threats that were going to be in the house.
And I guess was anyone else in the house other than the people you talked about earlier?
A teenage daughter, I believe, of the complainant was sleeping upstairs in her bedroom.
That's terrible.
And I guess upstairs, what part of the house was that?
Either the first or the second floor. I believe it was the first floor, though.
And did other officers then arrive on scene?
Yes.
And what did you do at that point?
I stayed with the complainants, Tara and Steven, while the other additional officers cleared the residence.
And by, I guess, what do you mean by cleared, just in everyday jargon?
Oh, sorry. So they would make sure the residents didn't have any other threats, like anybody else that was not supposed to be in the residence were not there. And I just stayed with Tara and Steven to make sure that they were safe while this residence was being checked.
Were they, and by they I mean Tara and Steve, were they transported away from the house?
Yes, by additional officers that had arrived on scene.
What did you do at that point?
While after they were transported,
Yes.
I just stood by on scene with Officer Wanish and Sergeant Brester until detectives and more officers could arrive to relieve us.
And did you assist Officer Wanish with crime scene tape around the area?
Yes, at the front of the residence before we had left.
And I guess generally were you sort of monitoring if people were coming and going in the house?
Yes, made sure nobody else had entered the crime scene.
The people who had entered the house, were they all members or affiliates of law enforcement?
Yes.
Thank you, Officer. I have nothing further.
Wow.
Cross-examination.
It's quick.
Thank you. Officer Plonky, a couple questions for you. So on Wednesday, February 23rd of 2022, you were working in full uniform patrol, correct?
Correct.
Was this zone 4E2?
That was my call sign.
Okay. Were you dispatched over to 829 Stony Brook Lane in Green Bay?
Correct.
And you received some information over dispatch, right?
Yes.
This residence, was it near like the Fireman's Park area?
Yes.
What report did you receive?
That it was the boyfriend, Steven, who called, but his girlfriend had woken him up, stating that she had gone into the basement and found her son's severed head in a bucket.
So you went over there to that residence, correct?
Correct.
By yourself in a fully marked squad?
I went over there in my own squad, but Officer Wanish came at the same time as I did.
Okay. And so then you parked on the street,
Yes.
and the two of you officers walked up,
Yes.
and it was dark outside, there was snow on the ground, correct?
Correct.
And who made contact with the residents first?
I believe I interacted with them first.
Okay. You're the one that knocked on the door, correct?
Correct.
And then the door opened and you kind of went inside a bit?
Yep.
Did you see some vehicles in the driveway?
I can't recall vehicles.
You don't recall if any vehicles were in the driveway when you walked up?
I don't recall. There might have been.
Okay. Do you know if the vehicles belonged to Tara Packanich and Stephen Hendricks?
If there were vehicles in there, I didn't run the license plates and didn't ask about who they belonged to.
Okay. And when you got to the door, you had some discussions with Ms. Packanich and Mr. Hendricks, correct?
Correct.
And then what did you do? Did you go inside?
Correct. I was inside talking to them.
Okay. And then Did Officer Wanish follow behind you?
Yes,
So were you on the first floor in the kitchen area where there was a table?
that's where I spoke to Stephen and Tara.
Try to find out what was going on, correct?
Correct.
And then, was there a decision made between the two of you for one to go down and check what was going on in the basement?
Correct. Officer Wanish decided to go down and confirm what they were telling us.
Okay. As far as seniority, who had more seniority, Officer Wanish or yourself?
Officer Wanish has more seniority than I do.
Okay. So he took the bull by the horns and went down in the basement to check it out,
Correct.
and you maintained things upstairs?
Correct.
And then, did you stand at the top of the stairs looking down to kind of keep in contact with Officer Wanish?
Correct.
And at some point then, were you asked to come down and verify as well what was in the bucket?
Yes,
And you did that?
I did.
Did you talk to Stephen Hendricks?
I made some conversation with him. I mainly talked to Tara.
Okay. But did Mr. Hendricks tell you that he went down to look at the bucket and you couldn't tell what it was?
Yes, I believe that was partially because he had just woken up and was almost in a state of shock.
Tara Packanich was in a state of shock too, is that fair?
Seemed to be that way.
And was it your understanding that Tara woke up for some reason, correct?
She heard the door close, I believe, to the residence.
The side door that you would come into?
Correct.
Okay, and then did she, what made her go downstairs, do you know?
She was woken by the door, and I believe she wanted to check if there was anybody still inside of the house or if they had entered or left.
Did she find anybody inside the house?
She did not locate anybody that was alive in the house.
And did she tell you that she went downstairs to verify the basement situation?
Correct.
And then that caused her to have the police called?
Correct.
But before the police were called, was it such that Ms. Packanich went up to tell her significant other, Stephen Hendricks, what she saw?
Since he called for police, I believe that's what happened.
Okay. When you were talking to Tara Packanich, did she indicate that her son would sometimes come over for meals and do laundry and things like that?
Correct.
When you were in the residence, when you came in the residence, did you have any kind of patrol gloves on at all?
I don't recall.
Okay. When you went down in the basement, did you have gloves on?
I don't recall.
Did you use jazz hands at any time?
After, I'll strike that. Is it fair to say
strike
when you
that.
went down the stairs into the basement, you looked inside the bucket several times?
Yes.
Did you have a flashlight as well?
I always had my flashlight on duty.
Did you use the flashlight?
I most likely did, yeah.
Okay. And then you looked around in the basement, correct?
I glanced around the basement, yes.
You didn't see anybody down there, correct?
Nobody else down there, no.
Then at some point you went back up the stairs, is that fair?
Correct.
The bucket that you saw, what color was it?
Black, I believe.
And where was it located?
Just to the right of the stairs if you were to walk down.
Like if you walk down the stairs, would it be like around the corner?
To the right, you would be able to see it as soon as you got down at the bottom of the stairs.
Okay. So as you get off the last step, then you would see the bucket on the right?
Correct.
Did you move the contents of the bucket at all?
No, I did not touch any of the contents.
There was a towel on the bucket and it was removed by Officer Wanish, correct?
Yes,
Did you look at the towel?
I believe I.
Did you
would
take it
also
to
have seen the towel,
headquarters?
yes.
Where was that sitting? Was it right on the floor next to the bucket or?
It might have been. I cannot recall exactly where the towel was at that point.
Backup officers arrived, correct?
Correct.
And then who transported Tara Packanich, Stephen Hendricks, and Ava Wheelock to the police department?
Additional officers, it was not me, and I don't know which officers exactly took that responsibility.
Was the daughter woken up right away after you got there?
During the protective sweep, officers had awoken her as they were going through the bedrooms.
Where did these people sit or stand, what I mean, when you were there? I mean, Tara Packanich, Steve Hendricks, and Ava Wheelock. Were they sitting at that kitchen table on chairs? Were they standing in the kitchen?
There was points where Tara and Steven might have been standing, but they were in the kitchen when I was with them.
Okay. When you were there, did Tara, Steve, or Ava go down in the basement?
No,
And was it your understanding that Stephen, that Stephen and Tara, they slept upstairs in the loft part?
correct. That's what I believe that it was laid out as.
And then was it your understanding that the ground level, it had like a kitchen and a bedroom, and that's where Ava slept?
Correct,
Then there was this finished basement, correct?
correct,
In the basement, there was a laundry area, is that fair?
correct,
Storage area?
correct.
It was kind of messy down there, correct?
It was cluttered, like as a lot of basements are.
Lots of stuff down there?
Correct,
And officers did a protective sweep of the house and found no other threats, correct?
correct,
And then you waited on the scene and you started a crime scene log, correct?
correct.
When you start a crime scene log, can you tell me what that involves?
So starting a crime scene log is you put the address, and then you start listing all the occupants who have entered and left the crime scene. So like my name would go on it, Sergeant Brester, Officer Wanish, and then we would mark like the reason for being there and then their time in and out.
Okay. And you did that?
I started it, yes.
Okay. Did you also assist Officer Wanish with putting up crime scene tape?
Correct,
Is that kind of like the yellow crime scene tape that we see on TV?
correct.
Where did you put the crime scene tape?
I believe we just outlined the front yard of the residence, marking, holding it around trees and making sure that everybody could see that they were not supposed to enter the property.
Did it cover the front door of Stony Brook
It would have encompassed the front door.
and the side door of Stony Brook?
I can't recall exactly if we had brought crime scene tape up to the back point.
Okay. Okay, nothing further, thank you.
Redirect? Thank you, you're excused. Thank you.
All business?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-morning break. It's about 5 after 10. We'll take about a 10-minute break and be back at 10:15. All rise for the adjournment.
Sweet. So Taylor looking fairly unrestrained there and sensible. So that was uneventful testimony to start the case. The state calling witnesses with just discrete areas of testimony, so not a whole lot really to do on cross either, other than what the attorney did do, which we'll see if that amounts to anything or not. I don't think so.
Counsel, anything to bring up before we take a recess, Mr. Saunders?
No.
Mr. Fraley?
No.
Very good, so 10:15.
All right. So comment, she looks rational and sane. Yeah, at times she's had some extreme expressions, I think. But of course, even if she weren't crazy with a case like this, who wouldn't? So it remains to be seen for me what the defense is going to do with this guilt phase of the trial, because this is a split trial, 2 phases. The first is she guilty of the crime? And then second, consideration of her insanity defense, which would be her burden at that point to prove. So in Germany, we observe working men taking a morning coffee break, drinking a beer. Yeah. That's one of the cool things about doing business in Switzerland and other places like that is at lunch, sometimes we drink wine, which would tend to take the edge off of business negotiations, and you could move through things more quickly than the over-caffeinated scenario that we had here. So I award points to Europe for that. So I don't know really what's going on here in terms of defense strategy, because I don't see what they can do. But also, they don't really have an opportunity to do too much with these first witnesses. Pretty tight testimony that the state has gotten from them. Just tell me about this 911 call. What did you see when you got there? What did you see when you got there? So not a whole lot, but there's more to this case. As I understand it, the head was not the only thing in the bucket. So this is going to get worse. This is not just a murder case. And if the state wants to pursue the 3 charges successfully, they're going to have to show what she did to sustain the elements of the other 2 claims or charges, which one is mutilation, and then the other is assault of a very nasty nature. So at some point, that testimony will arrive and be terrible, and the jury will be exposed to things worse than what they've already had to see, which is, I think, so far just the body cam. So that's kind of what I wanted to see was what the defense was going to try to do. I could only think that they would try to argue intent, because I don't know how they're going to argue that she didn't do it, but maybe they will try to argue that not necessarily that a particular other person did it, but that the state cannot prove that she did it. But I don't think so, because again, we've only had a couple of 3 witnesses so far, and they have later in the state's case her own statements. I think she told the police at one point, "Good luck finding all of it. Here's where this part is. Here's where that part is." But when you're cutting somebody up into so many pieces, who really can keep track of that? So that's, I think, coming to be seen. So, yeah, I thought the mom was incredibly calm on the 911 call, and when they got there, what can you say about that other than perhaps that's her reaction to it was one of shock? I would imagine my reaction would be different, but I'm just imagining that, and she actually had to live through it, and so I don't criticize what she, the way of behaving was at all, because that's how she lived it. She wasn't planning on that, and it's terrible, and she had to live through it. So if it was a shock reaction, it served her well, because she was able to convey the information she needed to convey, and the panic's not going to really help anything. So not that there was anything that she could do to help, but at least the way it went, they were able to conclude this investigation pretty quickly. Let's see, where was she doing the butchering? I guess we'll have to see what they say about that, but I think that did occur down there, and maybe there was something going on in the bathroom and stuff, but I think some of it was in that room. They just didn't show all of that in the body camera stuff. Yeah, so the opening statement's fairly restrained and professional, in my opinion. They just told what they wanted to tell, got the case started, and the witnesses have come and gone, and nothing outrageous by the state and nothing outrageous by the defense either. So it's just moving on through. Pretty calm courtroom. Taylor has behaved so far. She's had some strange expressions in the latest shots of her by the court camera, and maybe that's why they started showing her a little bit. Was her facade was changing somewhat. I don't know what any of that means. I mean, it's terrible testimony, whether she's in her right mind or not. So we're waiting for the court. We've got a couple of more minutes, and then they will be back. They're taking their morning break, and now we get to look at their seal, which says forward on it, which is nice. And these 2 people on it are the representation of how you would achieve this forward movement. There's also an arm with a hammer and an anchor. It should be, the anchor would be very triggering for Darrell Brooks due to the clear connotation that you are in an admiralty court, and he is not subject to the jurisdiction of such courts. Taylor not so crazy to try that, though, and she's proceeding with her new attorney after the one that she attacked withdrew out of the case. But she has pled not guilty, and then also not guilty by reason of insanity. Maybe the not guilty was entered by the court. I can't remember. But either way, she has those 2 pleas. So they split the trial into 2 phases. The first is whether she's guilty of the crime. Second is whether she's excused from that by a reason of insanity, in which case I'm sure she'd be sent off somewhere for a treatment. But if she's found guilty and then not insane, then she would end up having a sentencing phase where the judge would sentence her. Yeah, of course, you note, is there fringe on the flag? You'll note that the camera has been instructed to stay away from that so that the public can't see the inequity of someone sitting in a courtroom with fringe on the flag, which is the determiner of jurisdiction. This is horrendous. We're all going to need a drink or three. Yeah, I do think they're starting off pretty clean on this for what it is. Very sanitary for what it is. How it can stay that way with the 3 charges she has, I don't know. If it were only a murder charge, some of the details you may not have to get into, but there's more than the murder charge. There's the assault charge as well as the dismemberment stuff. So that's bad, I think. And I don't know what all was in the house and what all was gone in the van, but it was, the situation was split between at least those 2 locations. Is that how most trials like this occur? I don't know too many trials like this for what she did. I would say this one is pretty calm so far, right? Yeah, just in terms of kind of any trial, in terms of drama or whatever. No real theatrics by the attorneys, right? No yelling or hitting something or waving around or wild-eyed gestures and statements and things. They were both pretty measured in their opening statements, and so have been the witnesses. The officers didn't break down and at the trauma of what they saw. They moved through their testimony. You couldn't blame them if they had, but they didn't, and so it went pretty smoothly, I think. So every case can be its own. As the judge said, it wouldn't be a jury trial if they didn't have a technical difficulty. So they had to reboot for the audio. But guess what? They actually rebooted and were able to show it pretty quickly. So so far, so good. Very smooth trial progress so far. Not what I was planning to do today, but when I found out about how they bifurcate the trial, I started to become curious about, well, what are they really doing in this first phase about not guilty? Like, what is the defense figuring? Well, let's just go through the motions here, see if there's an idiot on the jury and maybe we get lucky, or do they have a strategy to try and poke a hole in the state's case, which is going to be extremely strong before it's over as they connect her to this obvious crime. I mean, they're not going to just show there was a crime. They have to show she did it, but they have some powerful evidence in that, and that she confessed to it. So, can a jury and court attendant see the whole film? Did they see the head in the bucket, whereas we didn't? Well, since we didn't see it, I can't say for sure what they did see. They were just looking at the body camera, so it depends on what was shown on the body camera. But yeah, they would have been watching the body camera for the parts that were cut away from us. But I believe that there will be further witnesses that are going to show much more graphic pictures than this. And I know they've had some motion in limine action to try and hold some things out and let other things in, and she lost those in a material way. So the jury's going to see what she did. And we won't see that, and we shouldn't see it. We don't need to be putting that on the internet. But the jury needs to see it. And likely, if you're in the courtroom and you want to look at it, you'd be looking at it too. I don't need to see that to know what she did. So anyway, thankful for that. I think we all are. Is bifurcation something you've seen or heard before? Yeah. I mean, sometimes proceedings can be bifurcated. But the thing about insanity defense is it's treated differently around the country. So there are 4 states that don't really have it as a defense, and the various tests you have are different, and who has the burden and what burden. There's no universal standard for it. So it's not necessarily the case that you would have a bifurcated situation like this. You could just all have it in one trial, which is how we do it. So they do there, though, and that brings up the interesting situation of arguing against her intent if you're the defense, if you can't bring in the insanity stuff in the primary trial, which they don't let you do. So that's why I felt like they're kind of, to some degree, hamstrung on what they're going to be able to do until they get to the second phase if she is found guilty. So that's interesting to me. It's a little bit complicated. And the judge is returning, standing. Everybody's standing, so the jury must be coming back in. And then if she is found guilty and then not found insane, which, by the way, the insanity portion does not require a unanimous verdict, only 10 out of the 12 jurors in either direction. But assuming she doesn't get off from that, then the judge would have a sentencing phase at some point. And if she is found guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity, she'd probably be committed, and that can be a substantial situation as well, as it should be for somebody who would do something like this. The judge's tie there seems to match the colors in the flag, so that's pretty That's pretty awesome. So I think we will see / hear confession tapes later as they move through it. First, they're establishing the crime scene, what happened here as they found out what was going on. It's going to be a very orderly presentation by the state. You can see that. Did she have a criminal record of any kind? I didn't look it up. I think I did look it up a long time ago, and maybe there was a drug thing or something like that, and nothing serious that I saw. So I can't say for certain. I don't think she was squeaky clean, but I didn't, I think this is the first time she's been busted for something of this magnitude, obviously. Wonder if she had that outfit or if they had to get it for her. From her social media images, it seems a little more conservative than what she generally would do. So good job out of defense if they got that for her. I mean, she can present herself as a normal person as a defendant, and she should. And good job by defense to make that happen. He's scanning his Dayglow Post-it notes. Different colors could mean different things for him. For object or ask this question or whatever. Here we go.
Sir, if you want to come right up here, and then before you have a seat, just turn and face her and raise your right hand to place you under oath.
All right. So he'll square up to the printer.
solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God. Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Kurt Brester, B-R-E-S-T-E-R.
So we got the
And witness
sergeant.
is yours, Mr. Saunders.
Can you tell us how you're employed?
I'm a patrol sergeant with the City of Green Bay Police Department.
How long have you been employed in law enforcement?
Approximately 15 years.
Is the entirety of that time with the Green Bay Police
It
Department?
is not.
Okay. And how long have you been with Green Bay?
11 years.
You mentioned you're currently a sergeant, is that right?
Yes.
And I guess what are some of your duties as a sergeant as opposed to a patrol officer?
There's a wide range of responsibilities for sergeant, from administrative and scheduling work to managing larger scales calls.
In some respects, do you act as sort of like a supervisor for a shift?
Correct, yes.
But you still work patrol?
Yes.
So is it the case that you still respond to incidents?
Yes, sir.
And were you a patrol sergeant in February of 2022?
Yes.
I want to ask you about February 23rd of that year, at about 3:24 a.m. Did you respond at some point to a call on Stony Brook Lane?
Yes.
And what was the reason you responded to that residence?
We had received a call that a resident inside that house had found what she believed was a severed head inside of a bucket.
Were you the first officer who arrived?
I was not.
And which officers were those?
Officer Wanish and Officer Plonky arrived on scene prior to my arrival.
And when you got there, I guess, what happened?
When I arrived, I made contact with Officer Wanish outside, and he explained to me what he had seen in the basement of this residence. And that's when I had entered the residence at that time.
Okay. And what did you do when you entered?
Well, I made contact with two individuals in the kitchen, and I explained to them, due to the severity of what was happening, we were going to do a protective sweep of the residence.
And a protective sweep, that's essentially looking for people that may have been in the house?
Correct, for the safety of us and others inside the house that we're speaking with.
Apart from the two individuals you encountered in the kitchen, was anyone else found in the residence?
There was a juvenile female in a bedroom on the first floor that we had contact with during our protective sweep, yes.
Okay. And I guess was she essentially woken up by officers?
Yes, and we had her go back into the kitchen by the other two adults.
And you indicated you didn't locate any other persons in the residence?
Correct.
At that point, Officer Wanish had previously told you about what he observed in the basement, is that right?
Yes.
During the course of your protective sweep, are you going through the entirety of the residence?
Yes.
Including the basement?
Yes, sir.
And when you're in the basement, did you observe any other parts of a human body?
I did not see any more parts of a human body, no.
Okay. And did you locate any areas of suspected blood or other related material?
Yes, there were red spots on the concrete floor that was consistent with blood. And also, I was advised by another officer that there was a piece of what appeared to
Objection
be
hearsay, Your Honor?
I'm not necessarily offering it for the truth, Judge.
Overruled. Go ahead and answer.
a piece that would appear to be a bone fragment or fatty tissue on a drain on a stand-up shower in the basement.
And so you mentioned the areas of suspected blood were drops, is that right?
Correct.
Were there areas of large-scale pooling at all?
I did not see any, no.
Okay, so were the drops that you observed, where were those located?
They were on the concrete floor, from what I recall, near the bucket.
Other areas of the basement, did you observe anything of that nature other than what you talked about earlier? And what did you do after the sweep of the residence?
I again made contact with the adults upstairs and advised, or asked if we could ultimately have consent to search the rest of the residence regarding to the crime. And we obtained verbal consent at that point.
So the initial responding officers, you're doing the protective sweep to look for people. Is there a larger scale, search of the house?
At that point, no.
Okay. Is that done by other members of your department?
Yes, later on in the incident, yes.
And did they ultimately arrive to the house as well?
Yes.
Thank you, Sergeant. I have nothing further.
Yeah.
Cross-examination.
Wow.
Sergeant Brester, morning. You were on uniform patrol on February 23rd of 2022?
Yes, sir.
What was your shift?
I was a night shift sergeant at the time, so I started at 10 p.m. and worked until 6:30 a.m.
And you were on patrol in a different area in the Adam district, correct?
Yes, I was on a other call at the time.
Okay. And were you asked to come over to 829 Stony Brook Lane?
Yes, sir.
Who asked you to come over there?
Officer Wanish.
And was it regarding a suspicious situation over there on Stony Brook?
Yes.
Did you hear something from dispatch? Did they give you any details as to why you were supposed to go over there?
Yes, while I was on the initial call I was on, I did hear the Stony Brook call being dispatched out, and I did hear the nature of the call at that time, yes.
So then you left the Adams district, went over to Stony Brook, and where did you park?
From what I remember, I parked down the street, not far from the actual address of the incident.
And you walked up on the sidewalk?
Sidewalk into the driveway, correct?
Okay. And did you see Officer Plonky and Officer Wanish there then outside?
Yes,
And did they kind of brief you on what was going on?
yes.
Was that outside?
I believe it was outside, yes.
And did you try to figure out a game plan as to what to do?
Yes,
Officer Wanish needed your assistance because this was kind of an unusual situation. Is that fair?
correct.
Yeah.
And they wanted you as the supervisor, as the sergeant, to kind of verify what they were seeing, correct?
Yes,
And you had responded to this location at 829 Stony Brook Lane with your emergency lights and sirens on, correct?
yes, sir.
It was a kind of a dire emergency situation, correct?
From what we're gathering at the point, yes.
So then you walked inside the residence,
Yes.
and who did you talk to first?
I talked with a male and a female at the kitchen table. I believe her name was Tara and the male was Stephen.
Okay. And did you have any concerns about what they were saying? Whether they
Not that they're saying, I don't know if they're in shock, but it's, yeah, they were, he appeared to be drinking alcohol, but other than that, I think, yeah, there was nothing out of the ordinary at the time.
you were able to converse with them?
Yes,
And then were you asked to go down to the basement to check it out?
yes,
And did you?
yes.
Did you have patrol gloves on?
I cannot recall.
Okay. Tell me what happened when you started your descent down into the basement.
Well, we went down the basement and from what I remember, I asked where the bucket was and we found the bucket at the bottom of the stairs off to the right. And there was what appeared to be some kind of toweling or cloth over the bucket, and we opened it up and I confirmed that it appeared to be a human severed head.
Okay. And when you were down in the basement, were the other officers down there, Plonky and
I
Wanish?
believe at least one came down there with me. I thought maybe one stayed upstairs with the two adults.
Okay, just to maintain.
Right.
And then did you decide to call for additional assistance?
We did at that time, yes.
Was it your call?
Yes.
Who else did you call to come over?
The other officers that were on scene, and then we had another sergeant was working as the shift commander at the time, and he began making phone calls to detective division and additional supervisors above my rank.
This residence at 829 Stony Brook, was it essentially 3 levels with a basement, a floor level, and then an upstairs?
I know for sure the basement and the main level. I can't remember about the upstairs. I believe there was an upstairs.
Did you go up there and check it out?
Not that I know. I remember for sure the basement and the first floor.
Okay. You found no other people besides Tara, Steven, and Ava, correct?
Correct.
You didn't see Taylor Schabusiness there, correct?
No, sir.
You didn't see any body parts there, correct?
Besides the severed head, that's it.
The downstairs, was it fair that it was sort of in disarray?
It was it appeared to be a live-in basement bedroom that people were somebody was living in. Yes.
How long did it take before Mr. Hendricks, Miss Packanich, and Miss Wheelock were, taken out of the home and brought down to the police department?
I would say within the first 20 minutes, half hour I was there.
And was her bedroom on the ground level off the kitchen?
Whose bedroom?
Miss Wheelock, Ava Wheelock, was her bedroom like on the same floor as the kitchen?
Yes, between the kitchen and the living room.
Can you describe that ground level when you come in that side door?
Sure. So you come out the side door, you walk up a few stairs into the kitchen to your left, and then when you go through the kitchen, there's a hallway that runs, I guess, north and south, with the living room on your right and the bedroom in the right as well, down the hallway.
Is there a bathroom there on the first floor?
I believe there was.
Okay, and that's all there is to the first floor? It's
Yes.
it's a very small house, correct?
Yeah, it's a smaller house.
Cape Cod style?
Yeah,
There's a separate garage there?
there was a detached garage, correct?
Did you see vehicles parked in the driveway on that particular evening?
Not that I could recall.
Okay. It's a while ago, correct?
Pardon?
This was a while ago,
Yes, sir.
correct? But it was dark outside and there was snow on the ground, correct?
Correct.
Kind of a cold night, correct?
Yes.
And then you asked Tara Packanich if you could, search the residence, correct?
Yes.
She gave written consent, yes?
Once she got to the police department, she put pen to paper on the consent, yes.
When you were there, Sergeant, did your other officers, Wanish and Plonky, start putting out police crime scene tape?
They did outside, yes.
Did they follow all the procedures?
Yes.
Was there any way that the crime scene was disturbed in any way, shape, or form?
No.
At this property, there's like a driveway and then there's a separate detached garage, correct?
Correct.
And there's a backyard too?
Yes.
Did you ask Tara Packanich if she had moved the bucket at all?
Not that I recall.
Did you ask Stephen Hendricks if he moved the bucket at all?
No.
Was it your understanding that Ava Wheelock did not even go downstairs?
Correct.
And is it fair to say that prior to having additional detectives and supervisors come to the scene from the detective division, that you didn't do any other searching of the residence?
Correct.
You and the other 2 officers just kind of stood by and maintained the scene?
Yes.
And then other detectives then came, Detective Biller, Detective Scanlon, Lieutenant Strauff, correct?
Yes.
And did you brief all of them on what you knew?
Pardon?
Did you brief all of them
Yes.
on what you knew?
Yep.
Okay, nothing further. Thank you so much.
Redirect?
No, thank you.
Thank you, you can step next.
No redirects. which tells you what the state thinks of the impact
And
of
your
the
next
cross.
witness, Mr. Saunders.
The state calls Stephen Hendricks.
Ah, okay. This may be more interesting. He's invisible.
Okay, sir, if you just want to step up over here, and then before you have a seat, turn and face her and raise your right hand. She'll place you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God? Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
My name is Stephen Hendricks.
And then, sir, if you could move up a little closer to the microphone so we can hear you.
Stephen Hendricks.
All right, and with that, Mr. Saunders, the witness is yours.
All right. Is it okay if I refer to you as Steve?
Yes,
Okay. Steve, how old are you?
50.
Okay. And where do you live?
Green Bay?
Okay.
What Harley
And,
do you have?
Does he still live on Stony Brook Lane?
Yes,
And that's in Green Bay? What area of Green Bay is that?
West Side.
All right. How long have you lived at Stony Brook Lane?
Almost 3 years.
What's that?
And who do you live there with?
Tara,
And what's Tara's last name?
Packanich.
And are you in a relationship with Tara?
Yes,
All right. And how long has that been?
almost 3 years.
Okay. And that's, I guess, why you live at that house now?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else live at that house?
Part-time Ava,
Okay. And
her daughter.
who's Ava?
Tara's daughter.
And she still a juvenile?
Yes,
Did Tara have any other children who on occasion would be at the house?
yes,
And who is that?
Shad.
And Shad, was that her son?
Yes,
And did he live there full-time, part-time? I guess what was that arrangement?
it was partially when he wanted to eat, change, or do his laundry and whatnot.
And I guess looking in like February of 2022, by that point, was Shad an adult?
Yes,
So I want to ask you, Steve, about February 21st, 2022. It was a Monday. Do you recall the date I'm talking about?
yes,
And on that date, or were you still living at the Stony Brook Lane house with Tara?
yes,
On that date, did you have contact with Shad on that date?
yes.
Okay. And I guess what happened on the 21st?
Well, 21st during the day. It depends what you're referring to. There's several different.
I mean, what do you want from me, man?
At some point, did you and Tara go to dinner?
Yes,
And who did you go to dinner with?
with Shad.
And do you remember where you went?
Courthouse Bar and Grill.
Is that also in Green Bay?
Yes, East Side.
Do you remember what time you would have gone to dinner?
It was during the day. 3 years, maybe. I'm not positive, but
Okay. And then were you there for a little bit of time?
yes.
Do you remember what you did after dinner was done?
I believe we went home.
And what time would that have been, if you remember?
I'm not positive. It's still light out.
All right. And you went home, do you mean the Stony Brook Lane house?
Yes.
And what happened when you got back to that house?
I don't recall, but I remember Shad leaving. I'm not sure.
Did you see who Shad left with?
Yes,
And who is that?
that was Taylor.
And did you know who Taylor was prior to that day?
I met her several times.
And I guess, how did you meet her? I guess, what was that?
Through Shad.
Would she come over to the house?
Well, there was only one time prior that she was at the house, but they weren't in the house.
So it was just sort of in passing you had had contact
Well,
with Taylor?
yes, I pulled in a driveway and they were trying to break into the house.
So you had known Taylor prior to February 21st?
Just that one occasion.
And they left the Stony Brook house, is that right?
Yes,
Did you see how they left the house?
No, I did not.
Was Shad driving at that time?
I don't believe so. His truck was in the pound.
All right, so he didn't have a vehicle?
No, not at the time.
And I know it's a while ago. Do you remember what time they would have left the house?
Not exactly.
By that point, was it dark out or still light?
I believe it was still light out.
All right. And at any point that night, did Shad return to the home?
About 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, somewhere around there.
So 1 or 2 in the morning, would that have been then into the morning of the 22nd?
Sure.
All right. And what happened when Shad got home in the morning?
He rang the doorbell 6, 7 times in a row. That's his little key. Yes.
And did you open the door for him?
Yes.
What door did they enter through?
We only use the back door of our place because that's where the driveway is. So that's the only door we use.
So the door that sort of is next to the
It's on
driveway?
the side. It's on the side of the house, yes.
All right. Do you use the front door?
No, not really.
Okay. Is that kind of
It's
locked
kind of
usually?
blocked. It's kind of blocked off. We have junk in front of it.
So is it that, whenever people are entering or leaving
It's
that
always,
home?
it's always backside door.
Okay. And so Shad kind of rings the doorbell 6, 7 times, you said, is that right?
Yeah.
Was anyone with him?
Yes,
Who?
Taylor.
And did you see how they had arrived at the home?
No, I did not. I just opened the door.
And what happened when you opened the door for him?
They came in and went right downstairs.
In that time, in that 1 or 2 a.m. on the 22nd there, did you notice anything out of the ordinary behavior-wise with either Shad or Taylor?
No.
Had you previously had contact with Taylor, right?
Yes.
Anything different from that time versus the prior times you met with her?
No.
When she came over earlier in the day to pick up Shad, did you have contact with Taylor then?
Yes, she came in the house.
Sort of asked the same questions. Was there any kind of odd behaviors that you were observing?
No.
So then when Taylor and Shad then go into the basement, how do you get to the basement from that door, that storm door?
Straight down the steps,
So it's
right by the door. The door continues to go down. If you take a left right at the top, you'll go into the kitchen. But if you go straight down, it goes to the basement.
so they go right down there. What do you do?
I went back upstairs. I went back to bed.
So I want to ask a few questions then about the layout of the home.
Okay.
So the area that you're talking about, the door, is that on the main level?
Yes.
Are there any bedrooms on that level of the home?
Yes.
And who is using those bedrooms?
One of them is just a empty room, an empty bed that Shad keeps his stuff in, and then Ava's room.
Okay.
That's on the main level.
Your room and Tara's room, I should ask first, do you share a room?
Yes, it's
And
on the
where is-
second floor.
Okay, that's on the second floor. Are
Yes.
there any other rooms on the second floor of the home?
No, it's just a long hall, closet space, and then a bedroom.
So after they go to the basement that morning, you go back up to to your room?
Second floor, yes.
All right. And do you go back to sleep?
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. After that point, do you have any other contact with Shad?
No, it was the last time I seen him.
And that was 1 or 2 a.m. on the 22nd?
Yes.
What about Taylor? Had you had any contact with Taylor after that point?
At one point, I was in the kitchen, and she had come upstairs, and I borrowed her a pair of reading glasses.
Do you remember when that was?
It was about 9:30 a.m.
Is it the same day that you're talking about?
Yes,
Would that be the 22nd?
be the 22nd, yes.
So you're in the kitchen about 9:30 in the morning and Taylor comes in the kitchen?
Yeah,
And I guess the kitchen, is that right off of those stairs?
it's right off the stairs, yes.
And I guess what happens when Taylor comes in the kitchen there?
Nothing. She asked if I had a pair of glasses. I had a pair. I wear readers, and I buy them by the case because I lose everything.
And then, I guess, did she take those glasses?
Yeah,
Okay, I guess, were they like, what kind of glasses were
they're
they?
just black glasses, black frame, readers. They're just cheaters.
But like a black, is it like a thicker frame?
No, not really.
But just like more than a wire frame?
Yeah, let's just, they're black plastic, but they're not like super thick.
And during that time you had contact with Taylor there, did you notice anything out of the ordinary?
No,
Any sort of odd behaviors or anything like that?
not that I was aware of.
So then, the rest of that day, the 22nd there, what are you doing throughout that day?
Arguing with Tara.
Okay. So you had a little bit of an argument throughout the day?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, did you leave the home at any point?
Yes, I did.
And I guess at any point during that day, do you go into the basement?
No.
All right. And you left the residence, how long after that 9:30 a.m. time do you think you left the home?
Well, it wasn't far after that, about 40 minutes after that, maybe.
And then how long were you gone for?
About 6 hours.
So you got back to the home sometime in the late afternoon?
Probably, yeah. That's it.
And when you got home, I guess, what is that evening like?
I really couldn't say. I was out drinking and I came home and passed out.
Okay. Anything, out of the ordinary that you remember seeing?
No.
Okay. Still aren't going in the basement at any point?
No.
I then want to ask about the following, I guess, morning time. Do you remember anything happening of note in that early morning of the 23rd?
Except for when I was woken up, you mean? Other than that?
Yeah, so were you woken up on that time?
I was woken up, yes.
And can you tell me what happened with that?
Tara had woken me up and said she thinks she found Chad, her son's, that's how she put it. I found my son's head in a bucket. So I'm dumbfounded. Didn't believe her. Thought she was having a mental issue or something.
Sure. So do you remember what time this would have been?
Had to be about between 2 and 3 in the morning. I know it was the middle of the night.
All right. And you said you were woken up. Were you sleeping in that room up in the second floor?
Yes,
And Tara had woken you up?
yes, after she heard her door slam.
Is that something you heard, or that's information Tara's telling
I
you?
don't recall if I heard it, but I know that I woke up a little bit when she got up.
And at some point, she comes back and tells you
Yes.
some information?
Yes.
What do you do then?
I go downstairs and see what the hell she's talking about, and I can't see anything, so we go back upstairs and contemplate what the heck to do.
So I guess what do you do specifically when you go downstairs?
I went to the basement and observed a bucket that she said, but I don't know, my mind blocked it out, but all I seen was like hair, like an animal or something. I didn't know what the heck.
The bucket that you remember seeing, is that typically located right next to the stairs there?
No, it just happened to be there that day.
So after you see that stuff in the basement, contemplate what to do, I think you
Yeah,
said?
we go back up to the second floor bedroom, and I called the police station, and it took me a while to get through. I didn't call 911 because I wasn't sure what was going on yet at this point.
If, it's a ways away, but if you can remember, from when you kind of remember getting woke up when Tara got up to the
Yeah.
time you call the police, are you able to approximate how long a time we're talking about?
Within 30 minutes, I can't really say exactly, but it was within 30 minutes. I mean, she woke me up, went downstairs, went back upstairs, and then it took me about 10 minutes to get through because I didn't call 911, I called the police department.
You got through to a dispatcher at some point?
Yes.
Well, if that's it for this guy, it is also pretty streamlined. Conference with his co-counsel. See if he's got another topic to cover.
So after that point, did officers arrive at your home?
Yes, 2 uniformed officers.
Did you speak with them about sort of what you observed?
Yeah.
And did you go down to the police department then and speak further with officers?
Well, they had us put our phones on the table and then waited for, I think they escorted us to the Green Bay Police Department at that time.
Thank you, Steve. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Freilich.
Mr. Hendricks, good morning.
Good morning.
Shad Therian is the son of your girlfriend, Tara Packanich, correct?
Yes,
He's not your son, right?
right.
And he wasn't living at the 829 Stony Brook Lane property in February of 2022, was he?
No,
He lived with his father, Michael Therian, correct?
correct.
He would come over to the residence on Stony Brook to eat, take a shower, do laundry, things like that,
Sure.
and to come and visit you and Tara, his mom?
Well, more Tara.
Okay. All right. But you knew him, right?
Yes,
You had only met Taylor Schabusiness one time before?
prior to that, yes.
And that was a brief meeting, is that correct?
Yes,
And sir, was it your understanding that Taylor Schabusiness went to high school and maybe middle school with Shad Therian?
that was my understanding.
And that they went to high school at Bayport together, correct?
I understood that, yeah.
The last time you saw Shad Therian was when?
About 2 o'clock in the morning on Monday night, going into Tuesday.
February 21st of 2022?
22nd, it was one of them.
Okay. On that Monday?
I believe so, Monday.
And
Monday.
was it, sir, was it your testimony that you went to the courthouse bar and grill in Green Bay with your girlfriend Tara Packanich and then with Shad Therian?
Yes,
Okay. You had some dinner there, correct?
yes.
Okay.
Appetizers,
Okay. Some drinks?
yep,
And then you came back home to Stony Brook?
yes.
And then at some point, did Shad leave the residence then?
Yes,
Do you know what time?
not exactly. It's
And-
still light out.
Okay. Was it your understanding that Shad was picked up by someone?
Yes,
Who was that?
Taylor,
Okay. So she picked him up and they left together?
yes.
Was anybody else with him?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. And then you didn't see him again?
Not till late that night.
On February 22nd of
Yeah,
2022?
I think that's where it'd be 22nd by then, because it was after midnight. Yeah.
Okay. So you heard some pounding on the side door?
No, I heard the doorbell ring 6 times.
Okay. That's kind of his clue to be let in, correct?
Yeah, it was key.
And so then you came down, you opened the door?
Yes,
And is it your testimony that Taylor Schabusiness and Shad Therian then went right down the basement?
yes.
And you were tired, so you went back upstairs to bed, right?
I went upstairs, yes.
You remember when the police came to your house on February 23rd of 2022, correct?
Yes,
You were waiting for them, correct?
yes.
You're the one that actually called 911?
Yeah, I didn't call 911, I called the police department.
Okay, you called the Green Bay Police Department non-emergency line?
Non-emergency line, yes.
Okay. And then you asked to have someone come over?
Yep.
And then do you recall meeting with an officer or officers at the door?
Yes, 2 officers.
And that's at that side door, correct?
Correct,
And the side door to the house is like right by the driveway, correct?
correct.
Now, on this particular night, there were vehicles in the driveway, correct?
Correct.
Whose vehicles were they, sir?
Tara's and mine.
Okay, what kind of car do you have?
I have a Forester.
Okay. And Tara?
She has a Volkswagen.
Okay, and they were parked like, off the side door in the driveway?
Yes, in the driveway, yes.
Any other vehicles in the driveway?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then you talked to the officers, correct?
Yes,
And you told them what you knew, or is that correct?
yes, and then they went down and took a look themselves.
Okay. They went down in the basement?
Yep.
And where did you go?
I sat at the table where they told us not to move.
Okay, and you followed directions, correct?
Yes.
And where was Tara Packanich? Was she
She's
sitting
right
at the
next to
table?
me,
Okay.
yes.
And when did Ava Wheelock get up?
I didn't even know she was there at the time, and right around that, right around the time they were here, they came over, I didn't realize she was even there yet.
Okay, did she come and sit at the kitchen table as well?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have issues with your vision?
A little bit,
If you don't have glasses on, do you have a hard time seeing?
yes.
Okay, glasses help, right?
Yeah, for reading, yes.
Okay, sure. If you don't have the glasses on, is it difficult to see real far?
No,
Okay. Can you see, are you nearsighted or farsighted?
I'm just getting old.
I hear him on that.
But as far as you can see, can you give me like a
Just
distance?
just words are blurry. Other than that, I can see you just fine.
Okay. And on this particular night, February 23rd of 2022, when you went down the stairs, sir, you
Yeah.
didn't have any cheaters or glasses, right?
No,
Everything was kind of blurry?
yeah,
And you thought that maybe Tara Packanich was seeing things, is that correct?
having mental issues, I don't know if she was hallucinating or anything like that. It's just, I woke up out of dead sleep and I'm tripping out now.
You were pretty stressed out, fair?
Well, yeah. She wakes me up crying, telling me she found her son's head in a bucket. Yeah, a little disturbing.
When she was trying to wake you up, were you in a dead sleep?
Not really. I mean, I was sleeping, but I was aware that I needed to get up.
And is it your testimony that when you looked in the bucket, you couldn't tell what it was, correct?
Correct.
And after you and Tara Packanich talked, did you talk in the kitchen? You know, after you went to the basement, and you came back up, and did you talk
No,
with her in the kitchen?
We went back up to the bedroom. That's where my phone was.
Oh, okay. And then you kind of contemplated on what to do?
Yeah.
You didn't know if you should call 911 or
I
not?
didn't know whether to call 911 or so I just called the police department because I didn't want them screaming in sirens and all that crap.
Okay, all right. How long after you made that call did it take for the police officers to get there?
It was late at night, probably 10 minutes, not even.
Okay. Did anybody move the bucket at all?
No.
Did you move the bucket?
Nope.
Okay, nothing further, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, you can step down, sir, thank you.
Then I'd ask the witness be excused from any subpoena and sequestration order, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, he's released from the sequestration order.
So if he
Next
wants to,
witness
he
then.
can sit in the courtroom. So the mother is being called right now.
And ma'am, if you want to step right up here.
To me, the fact that he's like, I thought maybe she was crazy when she says my son's head in the bucket and he wakes up drunk. I think that's an appropriate response on his part.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter, now before the court, so help you God.
Yes.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Tara Packanich.
Okay, then the witness is yours, Mr. Saunders.
Can we have a brief sidebar, Your Honor?
You may.
So this is the victim's mother. So it sounds like they just wanted to make sure there's some order or something on probably on what they can go into or can't go into it. Everybody wants to make sure they're following the rules. The attorneys on both sides have been well behaved, well within the bounds of how you should behave.
Accompany the bailiff to the jury room, and then we'll be back within 5 minutes or so.
Maybe it's something they want to discuss a little further before they get into this. But the state moving quickly through this case. Hard to believe it would be 5 days for phase one at this rate.
Be seated. I need to clarify with the media in the back that this is a victim and she's not to be live streamed. She's not to be videoed.
Okay, so that's what this
My
was.
understanding is that that's what's happening right now, so we need to stop it, okay?
Nice. So they won't show her. I assume they'll have the audio and show somebody else, but not her.
Stop. We're ready to have them back.
So that was that. So the judge does not want her on the camera. So that he moved the jury out so he could tell the media to stop live streaming the mother. But it looks like they'll keep live streaming the trial, so we'll hear what she has to say. I think they'll just turn the camera to other things while she testifies. The judge said don't live stream her. I think if they were going to shut it down, they'd shut it down because they responded quickly that they had taken care of it. I saw him do an eye roll, which for this judge is pretty expressive. And so I think he thinks you guys should have already known that. And he's not too happy about that. There could be a further discussion on this later.
Everybody can have a seat.
Camera person being extremely careful now. But, you know, in terms of transparent courts and things, he's allowing the live stream to occur, but he wants to control it and not put her on the camera as she's a victim and she's about to relive an extremely horrible experience. Her knowing that this isn't being broadcast all over the planet with her emotions shown might help her get through her testimony too. So a lot of reasons to do that.
And we're good to go, Mr. Saunders. The witness is yours.
Good job by the lawyers to catch it too.
Sir, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
49
All right. And where do you live?
on Stony Brook Landing.
Streaming personnel are on this one. I don't know that they can't broadcast her testimony. I thought they turned off the audio just because of she was seeing her address and such. But it might be possible they're going to do this while she's on the stand. So that's an interesting exception. Now, I don't know the juvenile female who was there. If that person, if she gets called, you know, what her relationship is. I can see the judge treating her the same way that he's doing here to protect this witness. But probably no other people than that. So they move through law enforcement and then the boyfriend. And now the mother is on the stand testifying. And if it's like it has been, that won't take very long, right? They'll get through what happened there and get another witness up. And eventually they'll transition from the scene at the time to the more forensic details of the crime, the examinations, what was done, what evidence was found. And also, you know, right now they've got the crime, the discovery of it, the immediate response by the police, and they're going to want to, or they're going to need to prove that Taylor did it, and also that she did the other 2 crimes that she's alleged to have done. And they will have that evidence, which is some circumstantial evidence plus her, her own statements to the police, where I think she essentially confessed to at least some of this, the murdering part and the dismembering part. Maybe not the other, although I think they got the idea of the other from her. So in theory, they have statements from her on all 3 charges that she faces. And there will be some significantly graphic testimony by, I would assume, medical personnel, maybe the detectives too, to establish what was going on there in greater detail than what we've had so far. But a very efficient presentation of the case by the state so far. And the defense has asked questions, but within the realm of reason and no drama. Well, I guess they can show something other than that logo. So I see the question, is this allowed? And I'm not sure which part you're asking me there. Did they forget to turn it back on? I'm thinking that they have correctly, or not correctly, because I didn't read it, but they have construed the order from the court to prohibit the live streaming of this witness, not just in video, but audio as well. And that, I don't know their particular statute there, but generally it's the judge's discretion what gets shown or not if things are going to be shown. And so they're construing the order that this witness is protected. And okay, she's probably having a hard time doing this. This was her son, not just showing her, but maybe the way that she's going to testify as well. And I said in a comment a little bit ago that, bringing the mother on the stand will accomplish a couple of things. And one is further getting the facts on the table that the state wants to get on the table, but also probably to show some emotion here, a connection with the victim to some of the loss that was suffered. It's not an element of the crime, but you want the jury to feel that, right? You want the jury to see, look, we really lost somebody here who was loved, the horror of this crime. And that's also sometimes when you want to show some of the details of the crime, is then to get the jury angry at what was done to this person. Not hard to do those things in this case, given what happened. So, do I think this was intentional on part of the media? No, I don't think that. I think it probably they just were rolling along, and this was all going pretty fast, and they got caught out a little bit. And if they're going to stream it, then they need to be cognizant of the rules of that and follow those. But I think the attorneys actually brought it up before she was before questioning started. So we saw her approach the stand, and that was that. So yeah, it looks like no audio or video of the witness at this point, which, you can see them showing all of it. You could see them showing or not showing her on the video, and you could see them just not showing her testimony, and that's fine. And the court's still open. You can see that any member of the public, pretty much, who wants to be there, can be there and witness it. So it's not a closed courtroom, but this is about putting her on the internet at the most vulnerable, horrible thing she's ever experienced, which is not necessary for the jury and really not necessary for the public's overall conception of this crime. I don't think there's going to be any material facts from this witness that are going to matter to the case ultimately. And if there are, you'll hear them in the closing argument from the attorneys. So I'm also just rambling since we don't have any audio, so that we have something to listen to. So to go back to this, in case any people have switched out, this is phase 1 of the trial, which is the guilt phase. And because she has pled not guilty and also pled guilty not by reason of insanity, they split the case into 2 phases. And the first is, did she do this crime? Can the state prove that she met all the elements of the crimes that she's been charged with? And if she's found guilty, they'll go to the second phase, which is, should she not be held responsible? In other words, not guilty by reason of insanity. And that is not necessarily a unanimous verdict. And also the burden is on her at that point to prove it. It can be 10 out of 12 jurors reach a decision one way or the other. And if they don't find her insane, but rather find her not insane, then it would go to the sentencing after that. So that's what's kind of strange about this, because I was looking at a lot of appellate cases this morning before this case started. with defendants complaining that their testimony about intent and their craziness is limited to the second phase of the trial after they've already been convicted. And they want to put that testimony into the first phase of the trial to say, I didn't have the intent or I couldn't form the intent. And the court there, generally, they won't let that happen. They will not let an expert come on and testify about you couldn't form the intent or you didn't form the intent. The idea being that the insanity phase is different. That's because crazy people can intend things. It's not the test of insanity. And they're not going to let you have a diminished capacity defense at the primary part of your trial. So there can be facts in there about whether you did or would have formed the intent, but not like the expert testimony of why this person didn't do it or whatever. So, yeah, they're saying per the judge's orders, no audio or video for this witness. So she was found competent to stand trial, and she's been through more than one thing. And to hit on it, since we're in this quick breather, insanity as a defense and competency to stand trial, it's two different things, right? The tests are different. The timing's different. So you can be fully sane at the time of trial or competent to stand trial, but maybe you were insane at the time it occurred. That's what you're going to try to convince the jury of, is this person was insane at the time that the crime occurred. Now, being insane in the courtroom, while you're at trial could help with that. But in theory, they're not going to put you on trial when you're not competent to stand trial. So you could also be fully sane when you did the crime, and then you go bonkers in prison or something like that, and you lose the capacity to assist with your defense and the things that are the test for being competent to stand trial. So it's two different things. Went over that a lot during the Brooks case to talk about how the insanity defense plays out, how competency exams play out, and then the slightly higher bar in Wisconsin, if you're Darrell Brooks and you want to represent yourself, of being competent to represent yourself, which is not much additionally, obviously. So every seat in that courtroom looks hard. Yeah, I've never been in one that wasn't as bad as church, or at least Baptist. Yeah, the one guy they're showing behind Taylor's, it's been a nail biter for him so far. So this kind of scowl she's had on her face a lot. I don't know if it means anything one way or the other. I don't know if it's a good idea just to show her all the time when you can't show this witness, because sometimes the judges will get aggravated in saying that you're focusing purely on this witness. You're focusing purely on this defendant, and that's not how you need to stream the courtroom proceedings. You need to show different things. So it seems like if they could do it, it'd be wise to show other things in the courtroom. The amazing seal they have, the judge's tie, and other things. They could pan over to the defense a little bit there, the attorney, and not just Taylor. But the main thing they're trying to do is not show the witness, who is the mother of the victim. So it's not for me to say, of course, whether she was crazy at the time of the murder or not. I don't know. I have to see if she's found guilty of the crime, which I think she will be, because she did it, confessed to it. There's tons of evidence. Then her real defense will be to try this not guilty by reason of insanity, which they're going to have to show that, she was incapable at that time of knowing the right or wrongfulness of her actions, or she couldn't stop a compulsion or something like that. And her expressions are pretty strong for that. Of course, right now she is listening to the mother of the victim talk. And so this is her response to that. Yeah, now I think the defense attorney, what you're seeing here is he takes a lot of notes. And that's a good idea, because if you're going to look up at the woman who's gone through all this, I don't know how as a human being you could have anything other than a look of horror and sympathy and empathy, and you don't really want to do that if you're the defense attorney, but yet you don't want to look like a cold, soulless defender either. So taking notes is a good solution for that. So yeah, not guilty by reason of insanity. It's not easy to do, and also the burden is on her there, not on the state. Once this goes to phase 2, if it does, which I think it will, it's on her to show that she was insane at the time. So if you're just not really sure about it, or the evidence doesn't really show it well, then in theory, she's found sane and she goes to sentencing. So that's the way that works there. 10 out of 12 jurors, either direction. It would find that. And in theory, they'll keep the same jury after phase 1 if she's found guilty, and then they would test the evidence and decide what they want to as to whether she has shown that she was insane at the time of the crime. So it wasn't a mother. It was the mom who originally found the bucket, according to testimony we've heard so far. And she went upstairs and woke her boyfriend up and said, you know, my son's head's in a bucket. He'd been out drinking. He wakes up a little bit foggy and thinks, what the hell is she talking about? She's got to be crazy. She's out of her mind or whatever. But he sees her crying and she's distressed, so he thinks, well, I'll go down there and look at it. She's got to be wrong, right? So he goes down there, and he doesn't have his close-range vision glasses on, and he can't quite tell what it is in the bucket. He just sees hair and stuff. But I guess it's close enough for him, and they go back upstairs and they call the police. And the police come and they confirm what has happened. So somebody's asking, are techniques, taking notes, speaking at lecterns, wandering and pacing covered in law school? Well, in certain classes, yeah, and depending on things you're doing. And when I got out of law school, I went to work at a really big firm, and so there was a lot of mentoring there in terms of that. And go watch, you know, if there was a talented trial attorney in the firm and they were having a case, you would take some of your day and go over there and watch how they do it, and learn those things, because you know there's a lot to think about in terms of how you want to come across and how to not, you know, how to play poker and not look like you just got dunked on when you actually got dunked on. Don't take super expensive pins to court and make it look like you're, you know, the silk stocking law firm defending a giant corporation against an innocent person, et cetera, et cetera. How you interact with your client, how you talk with them. So I don't want to confess all of those things because some of them may diminish your respect for the judicial system, but you're there to put the facts out, right? But you're also there to win if you can, and represent your client to the best of your ability. And you do everything you can to convince the jurors that you're the credible side. So how you interact with your client, how you want your client to behave, all the things you do, what you wear, how you check things off when you're questioning people, like this defense attorney here, probably doing the best that could be done, giving who is testifying, all of that. And just to give one example, since this is still going on, like in a jury selection, you might have your client right behind you, and then even though you're not remotely interested in your client's opinion of who you pick on the jury, I mean, maybe you would be, but let's say you're not. You go ahead and tell them that ahead of time, and you let them know that you'll be turning around to confer with them. And it's important that you look like you're conferring and you can talk about things. Nobody can hear you because there's a perception there that you're a team, like you're closely allied, like you trust your client, right? I want this person's opinion, and this person wants to give me their opinion because we're in this together. This is not my client. Like, we're together. We're a unit on this thing. We're right. You know, it's just one little thing there. So. And it's different. Like I say, in this state, when you question witnesses, it's like how these guys are doing. You sit at the table. So you can't be up waving your arms around and dramatically doing this, that, or the other. But you can get up and put an exhibit up and take it down or whatever. And so you try and time, if you do want to make a point like that, have your deposition stuff ready if you're impeaching somebody so that you can direct them to that or take it and show it to them. And then you're in the jury's line of sight as you're dunking on this person who's obviously lying to them, and you can give them the look. Oh, wow.
But you didn't see anyone in the basement?
I did not.
Dude, supposed to have no audio.
And when you heard the door slam, did you hear any other noises?
Dude.
Not that I recall.
Okay, not good.
After you saw what was in the bucket, what did you do next?
I went back up to the second floor of the house and woke up Steve
Hmm.
to have him verify that I saw what I saw.
And what did Steve do?
He got up and he went downstairs with me.
He looked in the bucket, but he could not verify that it was what I thought it was.
What did you and Steve do next?
We went back upstairs to the second floor, because that's where our phones were plugged in, and decided if we were calling 911 or the non-emergency number. And that's when we called.
The audio we heard earlier, was that the,
If they're not supposed to be playing this
Call that
audio,
was
the
made
judge
to,
could get
to law enforcement?
fairly upset. He
Yes.
told them,
that was you and
do
Steve?
not live stream.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know
After
the
that
court's order,
point,
You can see court TV saying they're not supposed to show audio or
officers
video
arrive?
for this witness.
They did.
Are you able to approximate, the time you hear the storm door slam to the time Steve and yourself call 911, about how long that is?
Not really. Time wasn't moving the same as it normally does after you notice that.
And then does officers arrive soon thereafter?
They did.
And she
you,
seems to be
Karen.
handling
That's
herself
very
very well.
Okay, cross-examination, Mr. Freilich.
Thank you.
Dude. Okay.
You are Tara Packanich.
I am.
You've been involved in a relationship with Stephen Hendricks for how long, ma'am?
Approximately 3 years.
And you live together at 829 Stony Brook Lane in Green Bay?
We do?
That's over by Fireman's Park area, right?
Yes.
With regards to Stephen, does he wear cheater glasses?
He does.
Does he sometimes have issues with missing his glasses or losing his glasses?
He does. I order 5 pair at a time.
Okay. Does he have difficulty seeing if he doesn't have his glasses?
Yes.
With regards to this case, you talked to police detectives, correct?
Correct.
And you talked to Detective Groff, who's here, correct?
Yes.
You told him everything that you knew about this situation, correct?
Yes.
With regards to this home, you own the home?
I do.
And is it, it's got a basement, a ground level, and then an upstairs, correct?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that it's kind of like 3 levels, so to speak?
So to speak.
Okay. Your bedroom and Stephen's bedroom is upstairs, correct?
Yes.
Is there a bathroom up there?
No.
On the
Sorry.
ground level?
The ground level there is.
Okay, and there's also a, kitchen there?
Kitchen, living room, and 2 bedrooms.
Okay. And you have a daughter, Ava Wheelock, correct?
Correct.
When this was all going on, she was 16, correct?
Yes.
Is she still 16?
No.
Okay, 17 now?
Yes.
Okay. And she was sleeping in the residence when the police came on February 23rd of 2022, correct?
Correct.
You and Mr. Hendricks have vehicles, correct?
Yes.
What kind of vehicle do you have, ma'am?
I have a Volkswagen.
Is it an SUV or what kind is it?
No, it's a Volkswagen Jetta.
Jetta? Okay. And what kind of vehicle does Mr. Hendricks have?
A Subaru Forester.
And do you typically park them in the driveway?
Yes.
At your house, if you're standing in the street looking at your house, there's kind of a long driveway and then there's a garage that's detached, is that correct?
Yes.
Then there's the house, your house is kind of like a Cape Cod style, correct?
Yes.
And then you have a backyard, is that fair?
We do have a backyard.
On February 23rd of 2022, when the Green Bay police officers came there to talk to you, is it fair to say that the only 2 vehicles that were in the driveway were the Subaru Forester belonging to Stephen and the VW Jetta belonging to you?
No.
What
When
other
I
vehi-
watched the video earlier,
Ava's Toyota RAV4 was in the driveway.
Okay, she has her own car?
She does.
Okay. So there's basically 3 vehicles, correct?
Correct.
And they're all kind of parked in line on that driveway?
Right.
Okay. Did you see any gold minivan parked in your driveway on February 23rd of 2022?
No.
Okay. When the front door to your house, you don't really use that, correct?
Correct.
The main entrance is the side door off the driveway?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have curtains in the front of your house?
I do.
Okay. And on the front door as well?
I do.
With regards to the bucket that was in the basement, you went down to the basement to bring the cat down there?
Earlier in the evening, yes.
Okay. And then you went back down there because you heard the door slam?
Correct. To see if Shad was still home.
Okay.
If he was not, to turn off the lights and
Because the
lock
light,
the door.
yeah, the lights were left on in the basement, right?
Correct.
And you didn't see anybody downstairs, correct? When you went down
Correct.
there? Okay.
No, I did not.
And as you were going up the stairs, then you saw this bucket?
Right.
Okay. And was there?
This is a brief history of B&H, everyone's favorite photo and video store. The year was 1973. The Mets went to the World Series. The first cell phone call was made. And Bleamy and Herman opened a specialty photography shop at 17 Warren Street, New York City. They had a simple philosophy.
Be honest, treat people right, and they will come back.
Okay, what happened? Just going out of the room for a minute, and what is going on?
TTON.
What is your occupation?
I'm an independent forensic psychologist.
Are you licensed in the state of Wisconsin?
Yes.
Are you licensed anywhere else?
This is not that.
No.
Can you briefly provide your educational background?
I don't think. No, this is something else. Hey boy. Let me take a look at this situation here. I got up to go get a snack, and now look. All right, I'm pulling up an old stream here. Just, strange. Okay, give me, yeah. Let me look here. Let's see. I'm looking to see what is up with this. All right, let's see what's happening here. All right, I'm about to get back in the game here. Let me pull this one out. Present.
Already at the house. She never went into the basement.
Okay. When the police officers arrived at your house, on February 23rd. You didn't go back downstairs, correct?
I did not.
The officers had you stay by the kitchen table, correct?
Correct.
And then at some point, is it fair to say that the officers had you, Stephen, and Ava all go down to the police department to give a statement or at least talk about things?
That is correct.
I didn't even get my drink, man.
In your neighborhood, ma'am, the houses are kind of close together, is that fair?
Yes,
Okay. Do people park on the street sometimes?
occasionally.
Overnight sometimes?
Be right back again.
They do, probably not in the winter.
Okay.
With snowplows.
Is your street, is it busy with people coming and going?
No, it is not. You probably don't drive down my street unless you live on it.
On February 22nd of 2022, when you and Stephen had a little bit of an argument, that was on that Tuesday?
In the morning,
Okay. He left and went to a bar?
he did.
Was he drinking all day?
I wasn't with him,
Did
but
he-
he was at a bar, so
When he came back, had he told you that he had some drinks?
he did.
Do you know what time he got back?
I do not. It was still light out. In February, that's gotta be 5 o'clock or something.
What time did you go to bed on February 22nd, that Tuesday? Do you remember?
I do not.
What time do you typically go to bed?
11.
Okay.
Or we were watching TV in our room, so I don't know if we were actually sleeping. I don't know.
And you have one cat?
One cat.
And the cat usually, does it stay downstairs or does it come
The
upstairs?
cat goes through the entire house, but the litter boxes are in the basement.
Okay, it's got free reign of the house, huh? Did you hear any talking on either Tuesday, February 22nd or Wednesday, February 23rd, prior to that storm door, slamming?
I did not.
If you were upstairs in your bedroom, would it be fair to say that it would be difficult to hear anything going on downstairs or hear a conversation downstairs?
I would not be able to hear anything in the basement, no.
Okay. All right. Nothing further. Thank you.
Any redirect, Mr. Saunders?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, man. You can step down.
Okay, so the mother's finished. It didn't take too long for her.
Your Honor, the next witness is also a statutory crime victim, and
Yeah,
I would
Lord.
just ask that she not be filmed. Also a juvenile, Your Honor.
Okay, so for the next witness, only audio, all right?
Okay, so see there, the judge said only audio, so I think it was okay for them to play the audio before. Here we go. So it's okay. So I have the Sarah Boone letter open in a browser. When this closes, if I'm still sentient, I will open up a different thing and read her letter, because I just got to read it. I know she's mad in it. She put her and Schabusiness together. This is likely going to be the juvenile who was present in the home, I think.
Just right up here, ma'am, and then before you have a seat, if you can turn and face her and raise your right hand, she'll place you under oath.
The audio seems lower on this stream to me, but I don't know.
Sound swear to tell the
What's your last name, Ava?
Wheelock,
Can you spell your last name for the record, please?
Wheelock.
And can you scoot up a little bit to the microphone?
Yeah,
if
maybe
you
it's just
could?
the witness. The DA is pretty loud.
Try to speak right into that microphone if you can. Ava, how old are you?
I'm 17.
Are you still in school?
Yes.
And I know it's summertime, but what grade will you be in next year?
Senior.
And who do you live with, Ava?
Both my mom and my dad.
Do you split time between the two of them?
Yes.
And who is your mom?
Tara.
Where does your mom live?
Stony Brook Lane.
And I'm going to ask to have you recall February of 2022. Did you have that same living arrangement in February of 2022?
Yes.
So at that time, you were living half-time with mom and half-time with dad?
Yes.
And do you have any siblings?
Yes, 2.
And are they older or younger?
Both older.
Do you have a brother or sister or both?
Brother, sister, yeah.
And how about your older sister? How old is she?
I believe she's 25.
And how about your older brother?
25.
And who was your brother?
Shad.
That's Shad Therian?
Yes.
Did you have a pretty good relationship with Shad?
Very close, yes.
Was he a nice guy?
Yes.
Do you know where Shad was living in February of 2022?
I believe with his dad.
Would you see Shad occasionally at your mom's house?
Yes.
What were the nature, or what were the reasons why he would come visit at your mom's house?
To hang out with me, to do laundry, and to hang out with us.
I'm going to ask you to specifically remember February 22nd of 2022. Do you remember that day?
Yes.
Started out as a day of celebration, right?
Yes.
What was going on that day?
I was at my dad's traditional wedding.
And was that in the general Green Bay area?
I don't know.
Okay. How far away was it from your mom's house?
I don't know.
At some point on that same date, did you return to your mom's house from the wedding?
Yes, at the end of the wedding.
And do you know about what time it was that you returned to your mom's house?
No, but it was dark outside.
And how did you get to your mom's house on the February 22nd?
I drove myself.
And when you arrived at your house, did you see anyone in the residence?
No.
What did you do when you got home?
I immediately went to bed.
And which door did you use to enter that residence?
The side door.
Is that the door off of the driveway?
Yes.
Is that the door that everyone used?
Yes.
And you said you went to your bedroom. If you were to enter that residence through the side door, how would you get to your bedroom?
I entered the house, and down to the basement is right in front of me, and to the left is a kitchen. So I went to the kitchen, and there's a hallway. When you go more into the kitchen, I went down the hallway to my room.
And that's on the first floor of the residence, your room?
Yes.
And then there's a basement, and is there also a second floor?
Yes, there's a second floor.
What's on the second floor?
My mom's room.
What's in the basement generally?
Where we do laundry, and sometimes people stay there.
Is that where Shad stays when he comes over usually?
Yes.
On that night, you said you went right to your room. Did you go to the basement at all on February 22nd?
No.
And you said you didn't see anyone in the residence when you came home, is that right?
Yes.
At some point, did you hear other people in the residence?
Yes.
What did you hear?
I just heard footsteps downstairs.
When you say downstairs, are you talking about the stairs from the second floor to the first floor, or the stairs from the basement up to the first floor?
The basement up to the first floor.
Is that something that you heard frequently throughout that day?
Yes.
How about people's voices? Did you hear any people's voices on the night of the 22nd to the 23rd?
I heard a female voice.
Did you know who it was?
No.
Did you ever see a female in the residence on that day, the 22nd or the 23rd?
No.
Do you recall specifically anything that the female voice had said?
No.
Did you hear two voices or one voice or more than two voices?
Just one voice.
Did you know anything about who the female was talking to or if she was talking to anyone?
No.
At some point, did you fall asleep on the night of the 22nd into the 23rd?
Yes.
And how were you awakened on that day?
I was awakened to bang at my door from the police.
What happened when the police banged on your door?
I woke up and they told me to come to the kitchen.
And did you do that?
Yes.
And who was in the kitchen when you got there?
My mom and Steve.
And did Steve live with your mom at that time?
Yes.
And you had not seen either of them prior to that time frame, is that right?
Yes.
And did the police want to speak with you at that time?
No.
Did you ultimately go to the Green Bay Police Department and speak with police about what you observed that night?
Yes.
Did that occur that morning, the 23rd?
Yes.
And you told them what you could remember?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Ava.
Mr. Fairley, cross
That was fast.
Ava, how are you?
All right.
Do you know Taylor Schabusiness?
Yes, when I was a kid.
How do you know her?
My brother's best friend.
Okay. Where did your brother go to high school?
I don't remember.
Okay. But you're going to be a senior this fall?
Sorry?
You're going to be a senior this fall?
Yes.
Where do you go to high school?
Objection, relevance.
Yeah, seriously.
I'll withdraw.
Sustained.
I can withdraw. So you have a car, correct?
Yes.
You have a RAV4?
Yes.
And your mom has a car, right?
Yes.
It's a VW Jetta?
Yeah. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay. You ridden in it?
Huh?
Have you taken a ride in your mom's car in the past?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Steve Hendricks, that's your mom's boyfriend, correct?
Yes.
He's got a car, right?
Yes.
So when you're at the house, when you're at your mom's house, do you all park your cars in the driveway?
Yes.
Okay. When you went to your dad's wedding, that was on February 22nd, is that right?
Yes.
I think it was a Tuesday, right?
I believe so.
And at some point, the wedding was over and you went to your mom's to spend the night, correct?
Yes.
And did you pull into the driveway at your mom's house on Stony Brook?
I don't remember.
Okay. Typically, when you go to your mom's house, do you park your car in the driveway?
Yes.
Did you see any other vehicles besides your car, your mom's car, and Steve's car?
Yes.
What else, what other cars did you see?
A van
Where was it?
in the driveway.
When did you see it?
Sorry?
When did you see the van?
When I came back from Dad's wedding.
Okay. So did you pull behind the van then?
No.
Okay. Where did you park your car?
The side of the road.
Okay. Did you went in the house then after the wedding, correct?
Yes.
And what did you do?
I went to my room.
You went straight to your room?
Yes.
Did you talk to your mother at all?
No.
Did she know that you were home?
I don't know.
How about Steve Hendricks? Did you talk to him?
No.
Okay. And you went in your bedroom, did you leave the door open or did you close the door?
I closed the door.
Okay. And then, did you go to sleep?
Yes.
What time did you go to sleep?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you remember what time you got to your mom's house that day?
No.
But it was in the evening,
Yes.
after dinner time?
I don't know.
When you came in the house, did you ever see Taylor Schabusiness in the house on Tuesday, February 22nd of 2022?
No.
Did you see your brother Shad Therian in the house on that date?
No.
Did you ever hear his voice?
No.
How about Taylor's voice? Did you hear her voice?
Mumbles.
You didn't know who it was though, correct?
Yes.
Did you go in the basement on February 22nd, that Tuesday?
No.
Did you go in the basement after you woke up when the police came to your house on Wednesday February 23rd of 2022?
No.
When the police came to your house, is it your testimony that they knocked on your bedroom door?
Yes.
And you woke up then?
Yes.
And then you went to the kitchen?
Yes.
And did they have you sit by the kitchen table?
Yes.
And then you waited for further directions, correct?
Yes.
And then is it true that at some point then, you, your mom, and Steve were all taken down to the police department to talk?
Yes.
Your brother, Shadtherian, would he have people come over oftentimes to play video games or hang out in the basement?
Object relevance.
Well, it goes to people coming in the house, people that he would invite over.
Objection. Ask another question.
How often would your brother come to the house?
I don't know.
Was it just kind of sporadic, like kind of whenever?
Yeah.
Okay. There wasn't any kind of set schedule, is that fair?
Sorry?
There was no set schedule, is that true?
Yeah.
And were you at the house on Monday, February 21st of 2022?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you get up on February 22nd to look out the window at all?
No.
When you went to bed, you were out. Is that fair to say that you were sleeping until the police knocked on your door?
Yes.
You didn't wake up to go get something to eat or anything like that?
No.
And the house at 829 Stony Brook Lane, there's a basement down there, correct?
Yes.
It's kind of like a finished basement, right?
Yes.
And then there's the floor level with a kitchen, living room, and your bedroom, right?
Yes.
Bathroom, correct?
Yes.
And then the upstairs, kind of like the loft area, that's where your mom and Mr. Hendricks, that's their bedroom?
Yes.
And when you were there on February 22nd, you couldn't hear any conversations or anything like that, correct?
Yes.
That's true, right?
Yes.
Okay, nothing further. Thank you.
Redirect.
I have no redirect. I just want to confirm that the state had not subpoenaed this witness. I want to make sure that she's released from the defense subpoena.
Yes, she can be released.
I see. She was on the defense subpoena in case the state didn't call her. Probably, perhaps the same with the mom. We didn't hear that. I think maybe she was. I don't know.
State's next witness.
Judge, I think we could call another witness. However, this is a good natural break in the state's case at this point in time. I wonder if the court would entertain allowing us to break for an hour at this time.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's about 10 minutes to 12. We're going to break for lunch, and I'm going to ask that you be back in the jury room ready to go at 1 o'clock. All right? All rise for the jury.
All right, guys, I'm going to set up a stream for the Sarah Boone letter and read that here in just a minute. So I'll catch you guys on this case later, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes with and see what Boone has. I will not have read it ahead of time. So if you haven't read it, it'll be a new experience for both of us. And if you have, then you can watch a first timer, see what it is up with this thing. Well, that's it. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Honey mailers are a great way to package your products.